Mr. Martin.
I'm not gonna find the agenda again.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the June 7th, 2023 Litchfield School Board meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Before we get started, we do have a member of our board who is remote this evening. Mr. Cutter is on a work trip, and so can you confirm for us where you are and if you're alone and what that's about, Andrew?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I am on a business trip in Orlando, Florida. I am in my hotel room. No one is with me this evening.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to allow Andrew to participate and vote remotely. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any questions? We do not have to do a roll call vote because we haven't started yet, but thereafter, once Andrew is participating in our votes, we will have to do roll call votes. So all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Andrew, you are welcome to participate. We're happy to have you. You're on the screen in the TV in here, so, well, actually, it's just your picture right now. And we're good to go. So please remind me if I try to not do a roll call vote that we need to do a roll call vote. All right, perfect.
All right, thank you.
Has everyone had a chance to look? Is there any review and revision of the agenda?
Just a couple of items got livened up, a few links, and we'll go through those tonight.
Okay. Anything that any board member wishes to remove from the consent agenda and put under old business?
No.
I don't either. Andrew, you had talked about the website committee. Do you want to do that today, or do you want to have that discussion on the 21st?
No, I think we should have thank you. I was just about coming up with you here. I think there does need to be a discussion about budget committee questions that have come in, as well as an update on website and probably also policy, just for board awareness.
Okay, so we are going to move those down under old business, budget committee, website, and policy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving into the summary of non-public actions from the May 24th, 2023 non-public session. I'm going to scroll down to our minutes here. Do we have that link somewhere where it's easy to read or not so much?
The items, the action items?
Yeah. That we normally put in the agenda that we didn't
If
this
you
time?
go to the non-public part of the agenda and you
Yep.
click on the non-public
Minutes?
minutes,
Right, I do, but it's just not easy, like I have to. All right, we entered non-public, the actions, let's see, what did we do? For nominations, we had, the board approved 500, for Shannon Riley as a CHS special education teacher, Courtney Bradish, a GMS pre-K, teacher, Jessica Carroll, GMS social worker, I'm sorry, Lynn Colatuoni, Spanish teacher at CHS, Megan, I'm sorry, that one was not 500, Tara Coakley, as a pre-K teacher, and then, the board vote was 4-0 with one abstaining for, Megan Glod, LMS ELA teacher. Is that correct? I think I got all of those. Resignations were Adrian Val Naylor, the GMS nurse, and Kim Barnett, the math teacher, and those were approved. And then I think that's it for minutes. Okay, for actions. Sorry about that. Normally it's nice and pretty in my agenda, and it wasn't there this time. So let's see here. Moving on to student representative report. Emma's at senior night, I assume, so she is not here tonight. And now we can move on to presentations and recognitions. And we have Miss Grantham here from LMS with some friends.
I brought some friends. I'm missing a few friends who were on the agenda because it is a crazy time of year. So I'm really thankful that we were able to get two representatives from our C3PO committee. And for those that aren't aware of what C3PO stands for, it's not about Star Wars. B, Devorah Holder and Martha Abney are here as two of our representatives. And if you can click on the C3PO
Sure can.
picture, we're going to go through just a quick little slideshow presentation to show you a little bit about what C3PO has been up to this year. So, B, you want to talk about what this was?
This was a student voice and leadership conference that we went to in a college, New England college. And we talked about different stuff that other schools were doing that were similar to us.
So we met with over 15 high schools and middle schools that are participating in this youth voice leadership, and we're working on building that committee within our school. This is our student representation. What's cool about our C3PO committee in regards to who's on it?
We have different grade levels, 5, 6, 7th, and 8th, 3 in each grade level. And it's to ensure that everybody has, and every grade has a different perspective and voice in our group.
Next slide, please. So what was this?
This is when we played games at New England College. The one on the left was the games that we played with different schools, such as like CHS or other schools around Litchfield. And the picture on the right was a game between just our group. We went outside and we played a game that we played in Spanish class.
And what did we decide in that circle when we were outside at the college?
We decided to paint our bathrooms and add inspirational quotes to the stall doors and walls.
Next slide, please.
Hit play.
This is a video that you've already seen, but you're welcome to look at it again. This is a video that our C3PO team made up their very own script and talked about sharing those climate and culture surveys with our staff and students and community members. So you don't have to play that one again because you've already seen it, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel. We'll try to get everybody out of here a little more quickly this evening. But
Just, if I may, so Mr. Piva took that photo.
He did.
Stunning photo. Architect Dave Ely, who designed that entrance, is looking at it. I mean, to me, it's just like a weird connection at the moment, so I'm gonna point it out, move on.
stunning
Beautiful.
sunrise photo by Mr. Paiva.
Oh,
and
no.
what was really cool about the video, I think, is to talk about it was totally student generated. We sat as a team, staff and students to talk about it. And we had some, points from the bills that we had to make sure that we hit as we were introducing the survey. But the kids came up with all of the ideas and implemented, I think, a pretty powerful
You
video.
guys did a great job. It was a very good video.
What was next?
After we made the survey video and we showed it to our students at LMS, we created a survey for them to take after they watched the video. And the survey was basically asking them about stuff that, like at our school, like safety and if they were comfortable or not, and the relationships with their peers and their teachers.
And we just had our first round of very draft data came back that we met with the bills 2 weeks ago, I believe it was. And our plan is to get some more time to dive into that data, and we're going to bring it back to our whole school and whole community come August and September so that we can really dive in, take a look at what it's saying, and how we can make some action plans moving forward. And see
painting
3PO
time.
in action.
Very nice.
Nice. What does that say? It's hard to read from the side view.
On the right,
Yep.
that says "Do the right thing even if nobody is looking."
Love it. That's
And then
perfect.
Jen's mirror says,
Mindset is everything.
Nice.
and I think one more slide.
Oop.
More painting.
Yes.
Just showing you how it's great to see the kids take ownership and have that involvement and participation. And what's great is this group, although it be mentioned it's 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, it's great to see that we just have such a diverse population and their feedback is awesome, and their energy is outstanding.
Very insightful.
Good. That's great.
Sometimes feedback is hard to take, but it's great when it's coming from the kids. And it's great to take that feedback and go, when they say the same thing that we are saying as staff, it's going, how do we get on that same page to make it all happen together?
So important.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Any questions for B or Martha as part of C3PO?
No. Thanks for coming to visit us.
Of course.
All right.
Keep
you
up the
guys-
good work.
You're good to go. Thank you.
You're heading up to high school
And you're
next
good
year,
to go.
right?
She is. I'm going to cry a little bit.
Wow. It's craziness.
You're gonna have to be our on-site consultant. We'll fly you in.
Fly, drive you.
You're all set. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Deborah.
Thanks.
Thanks, B.
You're good. Thank you.
For having us.
Thank you.
So the rest of my report is very quick. It is an extremely active time of year at LMS. Some of the things that we have ongoing, I see Heidi has a collection on her desk of, we had our Entrepreneur Day today, which was super awesome. I know some of our kids that weren't able to come tonight were actively involved. Our softball team is in the finals today and Tri-County Championships, so we're waiting for the result of that game.
It's packed over there, right?
It was, yeah, when I drove by.
Crazy bumper to bumper. We have the chorus and band has been awesome. Tomorrow is our Terry Fox walk that we have had traditionally. We're doing it at LMS and looking to raise money for the Norris Cotton Cancer Research Foundation. So still collecting donations for that. And the grade level that has the highest percentage will be able to slime the principal. So I'm ready to test out the new showers tomorrow after being slimed in the construction. And we're getting ready for that. Summer construction will be up and running and ready to go for the fall with no construction is our hope and dream. Any questions for anything in the report that I sent to you today? I don't want to read through it, but lots
No.
going on.
Appreciate that. Can I put you on the spot for a minute?
Yes.
You're not gonna like me after I ask the question. There is later in the agenda a dress code situation regarding there's been a proposed change for LMS hats or hats at LMS or taking them away at both CHS and not having them at LMS. Have you heard any feedback on that from students or staff?
Well, I will say definitely we did. So I've heard both directions. It's some people have very strong opinions in regards to not having hats at LMS.
Yep.
And then some people have neutral positions and some people don't care. We've heard from kids that some kids would like to have them come in for sure. So it's kind of
Mixed bag.
it's a mixed bag. I would not say it's a solid, yes, let's all have hats,
Or
but I
no,
would
let's
not say it's a solid, no, let's not have hats.
I appreciate it, and you answered that exactly as I expected you, but I
It's-
still needed to ask because
we-
you guys are boots on the ground, so you're hearing what people are hearing.
We met with all of our teams of teachers, and when Mrs. Thayer had the dress code committee, and she's not here to speak on behalf of it, but she directly asked that question about what are your feelings about hats? And I would say of the teams, we had probably two of the teams that had a very strong no thank you position. Two of the teams that had a we don't really care position, and one of the teams was like, it's all right. So that's the
Good to know.
general
Appreciate
Feeling.
the background. Thank you.
And
Yes.
Jen, I know that Martha was the rep to the committee, but you had two students who were pretty strong on the committee. Did you hear from either student about?
I did. So they had advocated for hats very strongly in the meeting itself. One of the things that I would say that we get a lot of flack for is we enforce policy. Our job is to enforce school board policy, and when the policy is dress code, and this is what the dress code says, we're enforcing it to the best of our ability within the language that is provided because that's our job. And when we've had kids who have come, whether it be pajama pants or slippers or those things, we advocated for them to advocate. It's not about coming down and saying, no, we don't want this to happen and we're not going to budge and we're not going to move. Here's the way to teach kids to have an appropriate voice and to take that voice through the appropriate tunnels. It's not about, well, I'm going to wear a hat whether you want me to wear a hat or not. It's about I'm going to advocate for why. What's the reason behind needing to have that hat on? Is it, you know, and some of the teachers who advocated against the hats had very strong reasons why they didn't want them there, because, you know, they're putting earbuds in, or they're pulling the hat down over their eyes and checking out and doing other things in that process. So definitely it's not a clear answer. I would not want to be in your position to make that policy, but I will enforce whatever you decide.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Any other questions for Miss Grantham before?
I feel like I was just here.
I know. Always here.
Appreciate the update. Thank you.
Thank you. Lots of cool things. So we're excited to have promotion coming back to LMS this next week, next Wednesday. Reminding families that are coming to do their best to carpool, so that we can continue to have the promotion from the location that our students are promoting. And there is no parking on McElwain for the full distance. We will have parking attendants out there to facilitate where cars will be able to park and park safely, to allow the fire department access around the access road around the building. So please pay close attention to those attendants if you're watching at home and you're coming to promotion next week. Can't wait to see you, but carpool and listen carefully to where to park.
And I want to punctuate that, because the thought is that we moved it due to COVID, because it sort of coincided.
no.
We did not move the event to the high school because of COVID. We moved it because there's plenty of parking and it's safe to get in and out of there. So Jen has an awesome plan, but it's only going to be as good as the guests attending pay attention. So please make sure that it is safe to get in and out of there, and we can continue to have it at the middle school, but we just have to make sure, if somebody has a medical event in a hot, sweaty gym, we need to make sure that a emergency vehicle can respond to that. And they couldn't in the past. McElwain was at best a one lane with cars. So please pay attention to the plan.
Without getting into the plan, is there parking lot on Pinecrest?
Nope,
You won't need to.
you won't need to.
Okay.
The
So we
portables
have-
are gone, so we have a few more spots now.
Not that
There's-
many more.
Well.
Yeah.
We have some grass parking that we're going to
Grass
be able
is what I was
to
thinking.
utilize.
Yeah.
That's going to be off the road to leave that road access and available.
Okay.
And staff cars will be gone by that point, so the full lot with over 112 spots are available for parents, which is more than one car per family. So that's why we're saying, please carpool as best you can, and we'll get there.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you, Jen.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jen.
And then we have Kyle Barker here, who is going to give us a presentation regarding school consolidation.
And if I may, I also invited Dave Ely to
Mr. Ely.
join us. So Dave, remember, is the owner's rep on the elementary school project, and so he's consulting and advising the school district. Kyle is obviously the architect of record that we've selected here, and we've done a ton of work on, and I shared the two meetings that were in-depth presentations, right? And I asked people if possible to view what they could. I will note that we went from 108 views to 159, so we helped LCTV out with viewership. And the second meeting went from 59 to 73. So between public and board members and so forth, we did pick up viewers over 5 days, so it's been viewed, and I appreciate that. But Kyle's got some details to share and walk us through. And Kyle, do you want me to show the slide you sent today, the pros and cons slide, or do you have something else you want?
I have something else I want to put up there, but
Yeah.
I'm realizing I don't have a link to this meeting online. Can you send that to me quick?
Can you connect this and put it up on that?
Yeah, will that show up for Andrew? I'm thinking-
Andrew can watch it through LCTV if he needs to follow it, I guess. 'Cause
Actually-
I'm not quite sure how else to coordinate that.
No, I can't.
Can you flip
You
your
can't.
screen so he can?
I can do it that
Maybe.
way, but I need, okay, how are we gonna get it up there?
So I can't log into the meeting?
Yes,
you
'cause
can.
then
Hang
he
on, I'm
can
gonna
share.
send you that link through the Meet. Okay, that's a good call.
Do you have Wi-Fi though?
I have Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Bear with me, I'll get you that link, Kyle, and we'll get
Yeah,
you-
so, while we're setting that up, I do have a lot to go through, so I'm going to try to do it quickly, so I know you've got a big agenda. Obviously, I was tasked with looking at consolidating the elementary school and the middle school onto one site and compare that to the previous option, which was a new elementary school on a new site. I went a little astray with that and started studying some other options. I'm not presenting on that tonight because those we quickly dismissed, but I think that it helped in sort of laying the background and teaching us a little bit more about the issues. So I just want to make it clear that this wasn't just a very quick attempt. We went into a fair amount of detail and learned a lot about the buildings and what's going on. One thing that I know I'm going to be asked, and I don't have the answer for, is what the cost difference is, and there's a big reason for that. The elementary school, the new elementary school, we spent some time studying, and we have some good information about what the cost of that's going to be. And I don't know if you remember, at one point I presented either to the committee or the school board about the inflation that we've experienced in the last couple of years. It's been very difficult to keep ahead of what the cost changes have been. But most important is when we're comparing two options where one is all new construction and one is additions, renovations, it's really hard to get apples to apples. What I'm finding is that new construction, I can come up with a square foot number. It's roughly $500 a square foot for the total project cost times whatever the square footage is of the building. But with renovations, it's very specific about what the task is that we're trying to meet. And so the problem is that I don't know what the level of renovations are in the option where we're adding and renovating. And so it would take another effort to go through the process of deciding. I got to do two-step verification to get in. I'm trying to do two things at once. I'm sorry, folks.
Take your time, Kyle. And IT's trying to move us to two-step verification.
I hate MFA.
And we all hate it.
Fiery passion.
But it's necessary, but we all hate it. So it's one of
It
those.
always recycles when I'm getting on a Zoom call.
Exactly, right when you
Every
need it.
single time.
Yep.
All right.
By design.
I'm in. Oh, no, wait a minute. Now I am in. Oh, I bet. I think
We're good.
All right. So.
Hang on 1 second.
But then Andrew's not gonna hear.
I'm going to turn off my mic. Is that better?
As long as both of you guys have your sound down.
Yeah, so I have my sound off. I'm going to turn my mic on. And try again, Kyle.
Yeah, I've turned my mic off.
And Andrew, can you hear? We don't know because
Your sound's
your
down.
sound is
I think
off.
you can turn your.
Give me a thumbs
Turn your
up.
sound up, I think.
Or type.
You could probably turn your sound back on if my mic's off.
Try it again. All right. Try again, Kyle.
Is it working now?
Can you hear Andrew?
Yeah, I can hear loud and clear.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
All right.
Thank you again for being
Not like we've been
accommodating.
doing this for 3 years. But,
teamwork, I
it's
know.
one of those details.
All right, now I just got to find the right window here.
Do we want this on?
On the screen.
This-
Yeah, is Oscar showing
Oscar,
it
are
on?
we projecting the TV?
I can, if you guys are.
We would
Yes,
like you
please.
to project, please.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a step back and review a few things that I've presented in the past. I know Mike had sent the link to the videos of our past committee meetings, but there's just a few key points that I wanted to go over one more time, because sometimes it's hard to really understand some of these issues without seeing it in plan. The first page here is the historic enrollments for the school district up through all the way up through grade 12. Why I'm showing this is that there's been a trend in the last 10 or 15 years of enrollments declining. And if you look at the births in town, which is the top line, and look at the last 5 years births, and those are the ones that are circled, you'll see that they're higher than they've been for the last 10 years. In fact, 2022, at 84 births in town, is the highest since 2009. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is I think there's a little bit of a sense of urgency that if something isn't done, you're going to have an influx of higher enrollments in about 5 years, if not sooner than that. So there's somewhat of a sense of timing here that getting the Griffin fixed is important because of the potential of an increase in enrollments in the next few years. With that, I want to go on to talking about the plans themselves, because what I said a few minutes ago about the difference between new construction and renovations, it's very hard to compare the cost. I want to kind of show you why that is in the plans. This is the first floor plan for the high school. And so when we talk about moving 7th and 8th grade up there, I wanted to show you what the challenge is for being able to do that. The yellow box on the right-hand side of the plan is the core facilities. That's the gym, the cafeteria, the auditorium, and then on the left-hand side is primarily the educational spaces. On the upstairs is the regular classrooms, downstairs is home ec, shop, and some other spaces like that. Music, art is on the first floor. And so what the difficulty here is that I know when there was an attempt a few years ago to move 8th grade up temporarily to the high school, there was a bit of a backlash on parents not wanting their 8th graders mixing with the high school. And so as I'm looking at this plan, trying to figure out how we do an addition, we can do an addition for the classrooms, but how do you separate the 7th and 8th grade from the core facilities when the core facilities are all grouped together on the right-hand side of the plan? And the fact is that there's just one corridor that connects the educational side to the core facilities. And so the thought of adding 7th and 8th grade brings up the question of how far do we go with trying to separate these. One more sort of quick example of how difficult this is just the cafeteria itself. When you look at the plan, let's see if I can draw. The cafeteria is in the middle of the core facilities. And it's very long and narrow with only a little bit exposed on the outside of the building. For students coming in, they come in and get their food at the kitchen and then move into the cafeteria. If we were to try to separate the 7th and 8th graders from the high school kids, there's no good way of doing it. Because when they come in, they're going to be passing by the high school students and then go into their seats. You can separate the seats out, but that process of them coming in and getting their food, there's no way to make that separate. We did look at the possibility of maybe expanding to the opposite side of the kitchen into the music department and making that a separate cafeteria. So you have two cafeterias, one for 7th and 8th and one for the 9th through 12. But then you'd have to add an addition for the music classroom, and you'd have to do some renovations into the music room. Suddenly, the renovation portion of this project got a lot bigger. And that's just one program out of all the programs in the high school. I think there's a thought that there's empty rooms at the high school, and so I did a study of the utilization of the rooms, and what I found was that the utilization is around 67% for all the rooms. An average high school is about 75, so the utilization is a little bit low, but there's no empty classrooms. We can't simply move 7th and 8th graders in there, so there's still a need for those classroom spaces, and there's a need for renovating some of the spaces that they're going to be using. So it didn't net out what we were expecting, and you can see on the plan the reasons why.
One question.
Yep.
So are you not planning to put the addition that was designed into the build?
Yeah, we were looking at basically.
Here, right? From
yeah, the addition would be off the end.
Here? Oh,
there.
Right, okay. So the lunch issue, couldn't you resolve just by having 7th grade lunch and 8th grade lunch? The cafeteria holds 160 kids.
That would be 5 lunch periods,
Right.
so kids would be
4,
eating.
no?
9,
There's
10,
only-
11, 12.
No, you just have to keep the 7th and 8th grade kids separate. Nobody's worried about separating the 9th graders from the 12th graders. And there's gonna be 625 kids in the school.
So,
The school was
right,
built for 600. Actually, I
Right.
think a little more initially.
the cafeteria is not sized
It is,
according.
Mr.
It
Hess
is.
said it's 160 seats in the cafeteria, which to my math is 700 kids. 720
That's
kids.
more than, 160 seats is more than 7th and 8th grade.
Combined.
Right.
90 and 87 in 7th and 8th grade right now.
1987 is 177?
Yeah.
So you could do a 7th grade lunch and an 8th grade lunch.
Right, so that would be 5 lunch periods, because the high school right now has 3 lunch
3.
periods for grades 9 through 12.
3 lunch periods.
Currently.
But there aren't that many kids.
Right, but it
So
would
the
still
total,
be,
the total enrollment's gonna be like 620 kids. If we moved them all there tomorrow, there'd be 625 kids or something.
Right, so if you divide that if you're trying to limit to 3 lunches, that'd be just over 200 students
Per kid, per
Lunch.
per lunch.
per
which is-
lunch.
But I'm not saying go to 3 lunches, I'm saying go to 4 lunches.
Right.
But
So it'd
then
be
you would have some
150.
7th and 8th graders that are going to be mingled in with 9th through 12th,
So-
because there's too many 7th and 8th graders to
share one lunch.
share one lunch, and
So
then
they would
there's,
have 2 lunches.
and then the other 2 lunches would be split between 4 grades,
There's only 400 additional kids. Or-
but there would still be 200 in each lunch, which is 40 over the seats.
You have to do the math.
So I think the exercise shows that it's not a simple, just move them in, that there would need to be a lot of thought about how many lunches and where they would go, and that's just one program. We'd have to also consider the same stuff for the gymnasium, for art, for music, and that some of these spaces are utilized to the level where there would be some conflict. And so I'm not saying it's not possible. What I'm saying is it's going to take a lot more thought, and I can't put a cost value to that until that thought has been processed all the way through.
Okay.
Moving on to the middle school, we've got some similar issues. First thing is just identifying where an addition could go. And what I found on the site is that the school is fairly close to property lines on the south and the east side of the building. There's some fairly steep slopes on the east side and on the north side of the building. On the north side of the building, there's a fairly large wetland that would be in the way. So really the only,
I'm a simple guy.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at the school.
Yeah.
The left-hand side of the school is what?
It's up on the
You
screen.
can see on the screen, the green,
See, I should
like,
turn around.
yeah,
yeah, sorry it's behind you.
yeah, but you can see the parking lot's the green circle, and then,
Yeah, you get a property line here, so this would be a small area
So this is the back edge of the school here.
This is,
Yeah.
yeah, so here's where you come in, you get the parking lot.
That's the
If
front.
you picture, if you're in the parking lot, there's a fair amount of grade change to get up to the front door. Then you get the driveway in the back that comes around. This is all fairly close to property lines. You can see the contours here get fairly steep. This is a large wetland right there. So where we're looking at, pretty much the best suited area for an addition would be out the front.
You couldn't put it on the left, this edge.
This edge?
Here.
This would be really
But-
tough. We could do small additions around the back, but doing it out here with the wetland, with the septic system, with these steep slopes, that would be challenging. Not saying it couldn't happen, but when we're trying to find an alternative that's less money, we wouldn't want to be picking the most difficult and most expensive location to put the addition. So then looking at the floor plan itself, I'm showing it much the same as the high school. We've got, in this case, the core facilities are on the left-hand side, the west side that faces the parking lot. And that why isn't that showing up? And then the educational spaces, the majority of the classrooms are on the east side. And you can see that the layout of the plan is very square. It's very rectangular. And when we're saying that the most obvious place to put the addition would be out the front, I think the thing to point to is the fact that in the middle of the building here is where, it should show up in a sec. This area is where the main office is. It's where the entrance is to get to the different core facilities such as the gym, the library, the cafeteria. And so if we were to add an addition out the front of the building, what you've got to picture is that an addition would have to be fairly large. My calculation is it would be about 50% of the size of the current building. So we increase the size of the building by half again as big. That could possibly be 2 stories. We talked about that a bit, but it's still a large addition. And what happens is that it blocks that entranceway, the entranceway that we're just showing on the
newly
screen.
rebuilt entranceway.
Yeah, the newly built entranceway would essentially have to come down, and we'd reconfigure it, and we'd probably have to move the main office out to the addition, because with the Department of Homeland Security guidelines, you want the main office at the front entrance. You don't want people coming into the building and traveling a distance before they get to the main entrance. So this plan pretty much shows that we would have to do a large addition, and we'd have to do a fair amount of renovations to make that work. Additionally to that, some of these spaces, such as the science rooms and some other spaces that were designed as middle school spaces, now it's finally popping up, these large rooms in the back, we couldn't simply move students in. If it's a K through 6, there's no need for some of those special spaces. So we'd have to renovate them to become preschool or OTPT or some of those things, which is exactly what happened in the past at Griffin. Griffin at one point had 7th and 8th grade and had science rooms and tech ed, those type of things, and those have become other uses, but that's been one of the problems that we've encountered when we did the study for Griffin, that obsolete space doesn't serve those new uses very well. A good example is the nurse's office that's in what was the junior high locker rooms and hasn't had much of a renovation to it. So if we don't want to move into another Griffin type of situation, we'd want to do a fair amount of renovations. The amount of those renovations I can't identify until we've had a chance to work with the staff, the SAU, to figure that out. So that's the reason why, I'm not presenting a cost differences at this
Kyle,
level.
quick question for you.
Sure.
And I definitely helped LCTV viewership on your previous meeting, so thank you for getting those reported. On the LMS plan that you just had up, was there any consideration to just the ability to even expand kind of the utilities at the building? I'm thinking septic in Litchfield, like with the land being so tight and the potential for expansion, is there any opportunity to expand kind of those types of systems, or is that even a non-starter because there's no room to expand those?
I believe the septic system could be expanded because they were going to do that 10, 15 years ago when the new elementary school was going to go on the same site. But you do have some of the same issues that we've pointed out before in that lower part of that site, we still have high water table, which is something we're trying to avoid, trying to get away from at Griffin. We would have to expand the septic, and I don't know what the electrical or the water capabilities are, if they could handle it. I'm assuming we'd have to increase some of that capacity because this, again, the existing building is, I believe, roughly 60,000 square feet, and we'd be adding roughly 30,000 square feet. So it's a large addition. So all those things would have to be looked at very carefully.
Excuse me, Kyle. Do I remember correctly that we looked at expanding that septic system at one time and decided that it was going to be problematic because of the proximity to the addition, to the development behind the school, to the north of the school?
That's true. That Novus Engineering did a study when we were looking at putting the new elementary school on the site, and there were definite restrictions due to nitrate setbacks and things of that nature.
So I think that's definitely a con you need to highlight.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I missed that.
Highlight that as a con.
Oh, okay, sure. Sure.
Also, so just in terms of the layout of the potential of an addition, was there any consideration, so where the gym is, kind of on the upper left-hand side of the page?
Yep.
Was there any consideration just to building kind of a straight, long addition, like carrying the gym footprint down into the parking lot? So like a long rectangular shaped addition without impact to the main entrance of the building?
Just coming off this edge.
Yes, coming straight out.
From the gym out into the lot.
Yeah.
And it could be like a multi-floor so you get the space, right?
Yeah, we'd still have to connect into the corridor system somehow, and the gym itself, being a big blank wall, doesn't necessarily afford us the best connectivity to the rest of the building. You'd end up with some corridors that would have no doors on one side because you're going by the gym, and then you'd enter into the classrooms on the other side. So,
There's that corridor right there, just pictured south, right? So there is a possibility to do that.
There's a possibility. I'm certainly not saying that this has a fatal flaw and that we can't do it. All I'm saying is that trying to come up with a cost, what I'm seeing is that the more solutions that we come up with, the higher the cost ends up being.
Well, if you
How
didn't
many
go to the
classrooms
office,
would
you'd
be
save a
in
ton of
addition?
money, right? Because there's a ton of money invested into all that security that went into the office.
There's a ton of money that's been put into this building already,
Yeah,
and
right.
we would want to try to
Mitigate the
save that
damage.
as much as possible.
So for example, just going with what Andrew's asking, if you had a long addition, students were accessing, say, the door by the gym to come in, but then they'd be going through a secure lobby to go toward the cafeteria, right? Which we currently have students who access the main office through that secure lobby, but every time that door opens, it's, technically allowing some access. So all of a sudden, if every kid going to lunch every day and every kid returning from lunch every day is going through there, that changes the game. So we'd have to rethink all of that. And I think to Kyle's point is, as you rethink each of these solutions, you're adding costs in order to go after it, right? So
So what happens today if you're in the green area, the kids walking kind of around the block to get to the cafeteria?
There's a pathway through the library.
the pathway is through the library now. So we changed that and made it kind of like a corridor through the library. And so they either go the back way or through the library.
In order
Very
to keep
few-
the front office locked.
Can I chime in from back here?
Yeah, because very few cut through that lobby area to go to the cap.
Nobody should cut through the lobby area at all, because that does make it a less secure campus. It means that we would have, anybody that's coming in to sign out their students would be able to get into the rest of the building. So we have one-way traffic that goes from the 5th and 6th grade, 7th grade side of the building, across the library into the cafeteria side, and the hallway by the Unified Arts, by Tech Ed, and the old fax room is the way back. So it's kind of a one-way.
Loop.
So so one way comes through the library right there,
Yeah.
right? So you just have the kids from the addition.
So you have the kids, right, but they're walking through the library where there are classes that are ongoing and there are activities that are ongoing. So every time that is a hallway, it's a disruption to the learning that's happening in the library. And then this is the only other pathway, and it's not a wide enough hall to make two-way traffic. Where this hallway is, it's narrower than these hallways.
So with your finger, draw for me. They come out of the gym class and how do they get to the cafeteria for lunch?
They come out of the gym, they go through the library, right? You see this
That
tiny
little
little
tiny door
narrow
right there, yeah.
doorway right here, and they go through here and into there.
And then when they're done, they
And
go.
then when they're done, they go all the way down here, all the way back here, and then up this way or back this way.
Okay. So if we put it where Andrew thought.
In
on
the parking
front here,
lot?
Yeah.
That's
there.
great. Where we
Is it-
parking our cars.
Well, I guess the other thing to
If it's
consider,
two
though,
stories, it's not gonna take up all that much.
But also you have double the staff now
Yeah.
because you're moving K through 3 up to,
Four more grades of
K through 4
adults.
up to, yeah.
Right,
apart.
it's net two, right?
Net two, but more people because little people
Little have more
smaller
people.
class sizes and more paras and more staff.
Well, one thing also to keep in mind is, if it's a long, narrow addition out into the parking lot, the distance from that last classroom to get to that cross corridor and then back again, if they're having problems with the distance between classrooms now, that would exacerbate that by quite a bit. One way to solve that might be to look at this as really two schools in one, and that maybe the K2 or K3 could be its own school in the parking lot and just with a small connection. But when you start doing that, you're increasing the square footage because now you've got two cafeterias, two this, two that. And that's another thing is that some of these, like the cafeteria, we talked about the cafeteria at the high school. When we're increasing the number of students in this building, the cafeteria probably is too small, so we'd have to do an addition for the cafeteria. Certainly possible, but again, it's what I'm seeing is that what we thought was going to be a huge savings because we're not building a second gymnasium, we're not building other spaces that already exist. The more that we try to solve the educational problems that go along with that, the more that we end up, duplicating some of those spaces. So I think that it is probably less expensive to do an addition here than to build a new elementary school, but I don't know by how much, and I'm thinking that it's not going to be as much as what people expected. On to the pros and cons. Unless there's another question on the plans?
Nope.
So when we look at the new elementary school, the pros for that are that we can design it exactly the way we want to start with, that it's going to be energy efficient, it would meet all the program needs, there's no worries about trying to refit spaces into what we want because we'd be designing them new. The location of the new property next to the fire department has a lot of positives to it. It's a better, safer environment because the cars are going slower. There's a sidewalk there. It's right across the street from the fire department, so your response time from emergency vehicles would be much better than you have at the current site.
90% fewer cows
Yeah.
was an issue this week.
Right. And that one of the big positives is that construction could happen on that site while education is happening at the other three schools without any kind of disruption. You wouldn't even see the construction going on from the schools. And so they could be built and then you move in and occupy it all in one step rather than the multiple steps that it would take otherwise. The one downside to this plan is what we were just talking about, the cost. And that's been kind of the theme of this study, is to see if there's a way to save significant cost in this process. Moving on to what I'm calling option 6, which is the addition to LMS to convert it to a preschool through 6th grade. The pro is that consolidation would result in operations and maintenance savings. You'll see that there's a little footnote on that one. And what I've tried to find is some evidence of what that savings would be. And so I did a study. There's some websites that cater to educational facilities that have studies that look into this kind of stuff. And I found numerous ones that say there is not a relationship between school size and efficiency when you get above a certain level. A lot of these studies are saying that from the 40s to the 80s, there's a lot of consolidation, and it made sense because there was still a lot of schools that were 1- and 2-room schoolhouses. And by consolidating into larger schools, they saved a lot of money. But once they reached a certain size, and there's not a given size, I did find one study that suggested 400 students is the sweet spot. I feel that 400 to 500 students is the sweet spot. But there's a pretty good consensus in the community, the educational facilities community, that anything above that is you're reaching low return on investment. Or passing what's the word I'm looking for? the return, basically.
Yeah.
That going from 200 to 400 saves a lot, going from 400 to 600 saves a little bit, going from 600 to 800 wouldn't save anything at all. That's pretty much what these studies show. I thought, let's go one step further than that, and I actually downloaded the school sizes from the State Department of Education and the cost for elementary school per student for all these towns. And what I found was that the average size, if you throw out the micro schools, the schools that are less than 100 students, and looked at the rest, which is about 200 and something schools, that the average size school is about 300. So I looked at, if this school is preschool through 7th grade, or 6th grade, we'd be looking at a school enrollment of up to 700 students. So I looked at how many schools there are above 700, and I only came up with 3. There's Golden Brook School in Wyndham, the Pelham School, and the Amherst, the Clark Wilkins School in Amherst. And so then I looked at what the cost per student was for those 3 schools. And what I found was that Golden Brook was a bit lower. It was about $15,000 per student. Pelham was about the same as Litchfield, within a few $100s per student, at around $17,000 per student. And that Amherst was considerably more, at $22,000 per student. So when you look at that, those are the 3 largest schools in the state. The average cost per student is actually, the average cost over all 3 of those is more than what your current cost for Litchfield is. So there's not hard evidence there to say that consolidating to a bigger school than what you've got is going to save money, because the schools that are bigger than what you've got are around the same cost per student. I thought, well, that's a small subset. We're only looking at 3 schools. I should expand that and look at a bigger set and average that price out. And what I found was that if you look at the number of students per grade and filter the schools in New Hampshire for just the ones that are 100 students or more, there's only 15 schools that are that big. And that average was, let's see, the average of all those schools was about $2,000 more than currently what you're spending at Griffin. So with a bigger set, the numbers got worse, that the bigger set of schools spend more per student than what Litchfield currently does. So to think about that, if you're going to consolidate, are you going to save a lot of money in operations and maintenance? The data that I've been able to find says no. I did look at one school in particular that I know a lot about, and that is the Highbridge Hill Elementary School in New Ipswich. I designed the building. It was put into service in 2011. It's the same number of grades that the new elementary school would be, so it's K through 4, preschool through 4. It currently has 400 students. It has the capacity of 500 students, so almost exactly the same size and enrollment that the new Griffin would be. And it costs $300 less per student than what you currently spend in Litchfield at Griffin. So what that's telling me is that although that's not hard evidence, it's suggesting that it's not the size of the building, but rather a new building would actually save some money because of the lower energy costs and the lower maintenance costs. I know for a fact that they employ 1 fewer maintenance staff than Griffin does because it's easier to clean, new facilities, there's less damage, there's less things being wearing out, so they spend less on maintenance because it's new, not because it's bigger. So that kind of leaves that pro as a question mark. I'm leaving that on there as a pro, but that is something that would take more investigation to really prove it out.
Kyle, can I just offer a couple of comments? Because when we were doing this analysis to sort of prepare for this presentation, so this was not specifically presented to facilities, I was a little surprised to get some of the numbers, and I just want to punctuate it so everybody hears, because as part of this process, we've talked about the fact that we want a school that fits the community. We want a school that fits into a rural setting and that feels the right size. We've heard not to build the Taj Mahal, which, to me means it's a big building with bells and whistles maybe, but it's big. So currently, 275 elementary schools in the state. Some are small. My children go to a school of less than 100, and the neighboring community has less than 70 students. So there's some small elementary schools out there. But in the state, out of the 275, Griffin is number 31 in size. We're number 31 in size, because you think about our cities, they build small community-based elementary schools. We're already the 31st from the top
That is surprising.
currently. If we do this consolidation, we jump to number 4. We become the 4th largest elementary school in the state. And to me, that caused me to really step back and pause and say, wait a minute, we heard all this stuff about what we want as a community school, and then I just felt like there was an out of character disconnect with that concept. And then we looked at the cost per pupil, and we're noodling on that, like, how is it that we're kind of in line or on not on the high side of that? I think it's because we've already got the juice out of the squeeze. So in other words, by being number 31, there's already been a consolidation and an economy of scale that is factored in. So to economize from 31 to 4, there's really no more juice to get, right? And I think that's the piece that we're facing as we sort of study this, and those are just important numbers to think about as we go forward.
So the other pros, it would make full use of the underutilized spaces at Campbell, and looking at doing the study of the room utilization. Like I said, the classrooms are not underutilized, maybe by a little bit, but not so much that there's empty classrooms. The core facilities definitely are oversized for the current population and could take an addition easy enough. But then again, the question is, how do you make the separations work? And then the other pro is with a larger elementary school, we'd be able to share some of the core facilities in the elementary school itself. Again, looking at the plan, you got to filter it through what the difficulty would be to lay that out. One thing that could end up being, I'm not sure if I've got this on here for a con, but if you do consolidate and only have one gymnasium, keep in mind you do lose a gymnasium in the district, and one of the benefits of the new school was to have a junior high size gym for practice, for the community use, and for the other schools. The downside to the consolidation is that the elementary school, as Mike just pointed out, would be the 4th largest in the state. That obviously what Mike just said about the savings is actually already baked into the size of the building. Some of the problems with the LMS site, it works now with the building the way it is, but when we studied it for the new elementary school, the high water table, the wetlands, the lack of, you were talking earlier about an event not being able to be done at LMS because of the driveway or the roadway in. Being on a residential street makes that really difficult. And if you were, the state requires any new building have 2 means of egress for emergency vehicles. So it really is required that there would be a second means of egress, and I believe the most reasonable spot for that to happen would be the elderly community that's to the north side of the property. So any kind of addition would definitely require that to be implemented.
I think it would ease the traffic flow too, in one way and out the other.
Yeah. It really should happen regardless.
I'm with you. I think it should go through there.
And Peter, that's actually, I don't believe possible, because the community to the north is a private road, so that's not a town road. Although we have a deeded right of way to access it for emergency egress only, we could not have an in-out loop because it's a
I
private road.
remember it as a private road.
Yeah, so that would be a complication. So we certainly could put a fire truck could get in if they needed to, or out again, but it's not something we could do on a daily basis.
We've talked about a lot of these other cons already. One to point out is ball field space. One of the benefits of the new school site was to have an additional ball field, for the elementary school students, but it would free up space elsewhere and would allow LMS to actually expand and have another ball field in the area where we had been planning on putting the new school. Campbell,
That used to be a soccer field back in the day, right?
I don't know.
If you're facing the school to the left, you kind of go through the park, where they
The
kind of
leach
go in the
field.
woods for
Yeah, the
cross
leach
country.
field.
That's the leach field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
this-
have played soccer on it. I think lacrosse practices on it,
Lacrosse
but
practices on it.
it's only because it's all that's there. It's not an ideal field. It would need,
It's not regulation size for any sport.
The kids, my kids played youth soccer there 100 years ago, so.
Yeah. Well, but the thought is that if there's not a major addition there, that to the left of that, there's a wooded area that's relatively flat. There's some wetlands in there, but that wouldn't be a problem for a soccer field, and the high water table would not be a problem for the soccer field. So if there's not a major addition or a new school going on that site, there is an opportunity to add a field on the LMS site, which would be a huge benefit. Same thing for the high school. I believe it was mentioned that the high school fields are fairly well utilized, and if 7th and 8th grade were to move there, they really wouldn't have fields that they'd be able to use, or it would be more of a conflict with the high school. So we'd have to figure out where the 7th and 8th graders would go for sports. The biggest issue here, though, is the disruption. If we think about, how that would happen, the timeline for making that work would definitely cause disruption, not just at one school, but at both schools that are the targets here. The next page gets into that in a little bit more detail. I tried to lay out what the timeline and try to just talk about the costs a little bit on that next page. And basically, a new school, if it were approved in March, we would immediately start designing. It would take the better part of the year to get to the point where we had permits, so construction would probably happen in the spring of the following year, and then it would take just over 12 months to complete. So about 2 years after the bond vote passed, you'd be able to open up school in the fall in the new building, with no disruption to the current any three of the current buildings. The size of the new construction is approximately 80,000 square feet. And the cost per square foot is something that's changing rapidly. I am watching it closely, and I've seen in the last 6 months that inflation has plateaued. It's not going down, costs are not going down, but they're not rising as fast as they have been. So that's good news for people planning on construction.
What's the cost today per square foot?
Total project cost for a new school is about $500 a square foot. We'd been budgeting 2 years ago, we were budgeting 400, so it's gone up 25% in the last 18 months or so. The consolidation, however, we get into it. The addition to the high school would have to happen first. So, upon public approval in March, we'd have probably maybe not as much time in the design and permitting, but at least still another 6 months. So that still means we're probably not starting till spring unless we could start construction in the middle of the winter, which would add cost. And then you've got construction that would happen for roughly 12 months at the high school while those classrooms were being built. And so there'd be a fair amount of disruption to the high school during that period of time. And then 7th and 8th grade could move in, and then additions would start to happen at the middle school. That addition, the high school addition, is approximately 15,000 square feet, assuming that we don't separate students and we're able to just reuse the core facilities. The addition at LMS would be roughly 35,000 square feet. So, roughly half the current existing size of the building. We could do it on 2 stories, but it still would take up a fair amount of room. That would take another, roughly 12 months to complete, and then move the students into the addition before you close GMS and do the renovations. And that would take another 6 months or so. So the total timeline for the option 6 versus option 5 is at least an additional year, and more impact to both schools as opposed to none of the schools. So that's pretty much everything that I had to go through. The last page is some of those footnotes that I discussed in terms of the cost for education at the different schools and comparison of the sizes. I certainly have more of that information in the background. I sent some of that data to Mike and Doug. So if there's more questions about what these comparisons are like, or if there's something you want me to dig into a little bit more deeply, I certainly can.
Quick question from my side, please. If there's what's our timeline we need to work back from? When is the board expected to vote on this?
So what we have talked about, and I guess it depends on what we decide in terms of when we want to bring a motion forward. We believe that we need to stay on track to have a warrant article in March. And if you back plan from that, we're really hoping that the board gives us direction on which plan to start developing by July 1st. So we're putting it out there. Remember, we had a plan. We were on track to build a new school on a new site. We have a purchase and sales that's been approved by the voters. We were asked to pause and to take a look at this consolidation piece, but we would like to have our direction by the end of this month so that we can then get a budget and plan how it is that we're going to proceed. I would envision us using a community forum in September to let people know where we are, take questions, be able to communicate in the fall anyway, maybe not September, but we've got a lot of work to do, and so we really need our direction. If not tonight, then I would ask that we have a vote on the 21st at our next meeting.
I'd like to...
Yeah, I don't think we should do it tonight. We don't have a full board present. I do think this requires a full board.
I'd like to point out the situation with the Department of Education, that Litchfield does have a letter of intent to fund in the amount of up to $7 million. Based on the funding formula, I believe pretty strongly that you would get the full amount of the $7 million, not the lower number that they had also mentioned. I was talking with somebody in the know up in Concord, and apparently they're very nervous about their status. And the reason being is that there is the possibility that there's leftover money in this biennium. It would be roughly $10 million, and you're looking at 7. They're looking at $40 million, so they'd probably pass on it. And so there's the possibility that there's money in this biennium to fund this project. If the Litchfield does not move forward with something to show that the state that you're serious about doing something, then you'll drop off the list, and you'd have to reapply to be able to get that money.
We had 2 years left on that, no?
Pardon? No.
Thought we had
We're a year in. We're a year in, so we have 1 left.
No, I thought the money was still available. I know it does for the property purchase.
So this biennium's money is $43 million going to 3 projects.
Yeah.
But one of those projects already failed to pass their bond vote. They've got one more attempt in March of next year. If they fail, then that money is available for you. So if you haven't passed something next March, that money would go to the next district in line. If you pass something which we don't even know what the state's going to require, it's possible to stay on the list and you can go into the next biennium.
Right, that was, I think, my understanding.
Yeah.
That if they didn't get to us on the list, we would still be eligible for the next round.
Right, but if you're passing up what you need, you might drop off the list. So it's important to stay on the list to get that money. And so if there's money available and you pass it up, I'm not sure if you'd be able to stay on the list.
Peter, the other piece is if you watch the legislature around building aid this year, there were so many bills that were, including completely eliminating, there was a lot of momentum to go to let's just get out of the building aid project process and go to just giving towns a certain amount toward buildings. And they can use it to pay existing mortgages, they can use it to pay, to save up to do a project someday, et cetera. So I guess my point is that even the idea that we would go to the next biennium, building aid may not look the same. So that's a fear I have, given all the conversation. And I monitored it pretty closely and was in touch with the folks at our association. And I was like, holy smokes, this could really be a game changer down the road. So that's just, I'd be remiss not to point that out now.
Yeah.
We can't bank on the same building aid process in the next biennium, because
Well,
it's a whole new legislation.
The law, I believe, did just pass, and they are changing it. They're not getting rid of the building aid, they're just changing the timeline in the process. They're gonna approve the money first, and then put the RFP out for projects. So it's a little different than what you're doing now. But the point is if you drop off the list, you have to recompete in the same competitive scenario. And my prognosis here is that you're going to have more districts now that the moratorium is definitely done. You're going to have more districts to compete with in future rounds.
I think whenever we recompete, we always lose off on that 200 points for free and reduced lunch, where other schools are getting that 200 points. So we're already starting at a minus, in a way, 200 points, which is tough to come back from.
So, like Mike, I've been following this pretty closely. In fact, the Department of Education asked me to be on a committee of just 5 architects that are helping them rewrite the rules. So I've got a little bit of an inside information as to which way they're going.
If I could make just a couple of comments on Kyle's presentation here. First of all, let me say that Kyle and I are both architects, but we don't work together. I work for the district, okay? And I really have no horse in this race. I'd like to try and be as objective as possible on this entire deal here. When Kyle says on his footnote number 1 that without a design for option number 6 to compare, this is assumed that it would be more money to build a new elementary school than to renovate the high school and the middle school, do the additions and renovations. I question that. I've done many renovations to several schools here in New Hampshire in several school districts, and every time we get into a renovation, there's always scope creep. There's always one more thing to do. There's always one more thing that's found. There's always something that comes up during construction, and this cost keeps going up. And if I were Kyle, I wouldn't guarantee that these additions and renovations would cost less than a new building. That's certainly an unknown. Without getting into the actual design of it and getting a program together and knowing exactly what would be done for size and for function and for availability of land and everything like that, I think that's a real unknown. The other thing that I would mention is that in the scenario where we would renovate first the high school and then the middle school, and that would be 2 separate years, I wonder how that would progress through bond votes. Would there be a bond vote 1 year for the high school and then we would rely on another bond vote the next year for the middle school? That seems to me that we would be at risk to get halfway through the project and then have the second half fail. I don't know exactly how that would work. It may be that it would all go in one bond vote, but I just want to bring that up as a logistical point that may be pertinent.
Well, with that length of a construction project, you could be looking at inflation as well. Inflation, like I said, is coming down, but it's still high historically. And so a 1-year project is going to cost X amount. A 2 to 3 year project would cost X amount plus X, Y, and Z.
And that would be for either project, either for a new building.
Well, a new building would happen faster,
Right.
therefore have less
But the inflation is.
less risk of inflation.
Right, okay.
So I guess at this point, I'm hoping that the amount of information is enough for you folks to make a good decision. I always believe that school boards, as a group, make good decisions as long as the information is accurate, and that's what I've tried to do.
Right. And then
From my side, I think the information is very helpful. Thank you for putting it all together. Just putting kind of my accounting hat on though, and like I don't know how we can make a decision without estimated cost.
Well,
I need to see the costs of these options.
We definitely talked that through, because I like numbers myself as well, but I think in order for us to do that, we would have to have some decisions made by either the school board and or the town as far as the separation of kids at the high school and what that would look like for the cafeteria, for the music room, not the auditorium, but for the music room, for the art room, for the gym, as well as some decisions that would have to happen at the middle school. I think what Kyle does well is that he looks and listens to the town, and I think that proved out in the design of the Robin Riley School, and so he'd be looking to do the same thing from the town again as far as what decisions to make for kind of consolidations within two things. So he didn't want to, in my opinion, kind of make those decisions for us, but knowing that those decisions are out there. So there would be several decisions that the school board and the town would have to make in order to provide him the information to then get the cost.
Well, and I think what all this is saying is, Andrew, that the cost is really up to you folks, not up to me. That the cost is dependent on so many other variables. If you were to tell me it has to be less, we could design it for less. If you're saying that the educational value for both options has to be exactly the same, then I'm telling you then the cost for those two projects would be exactly the same. What we're doing is we're basically building space for a finite amount of students. Whether they're in this box, that box, or in two separate boxes, it's going to come out to be about equal. So I don't think that there's there's going to be, it's never going to be exactly the same, but my feeling is my professional opinion to you folks is that if you're going to make the educational value the same for option 5 as for option 6, then option 5 and option 6 are going to be roughly the same cost.
So the savings might just be on the back end when you don't have 3 buildings to deal with, 3 boilers, 3 roofs.
Well, and that's why I did the study into the other school systems and found that that wasn't really there, that they're about the same cost. And that the only school that was actually, that I could compare the same size and configuration was Highbridge Hill, which actually costs less for a smaller school.
Can you send us the information that you sent to those folks and the schematics that you sent?
Actually, I made prints of this. I don't have the schematics printed out, but I can send that to you.
Okay.
And Mike has the worksheets.
Awesome.
I did also want to say that at the Facilities Improvement Committee meetings that we've had discussing this, I mean, the building admins, aside from CHS, so we have the LMS principal and the GMS principal, there are a lot of moving parts and considerations programmatically, like, you know, what classes, how do we organize the students, and how do they arrive, and dismissal and bus lines and car queues, and that the admins brought up just because they're doing it day to day. And there were a lot of obstacles and challenges present with a consolidation plan as opposed to the new building plan.
Okay, just one copy.
So if you haven't had a chance to watch those videos, I encourage you to kind of
I watched
do
the better
that.
part of this session, if you will. I think I owe 15 minutes on that one, but I got to look at the facilities thing and.
Yeah. I think there's, you know, we're considering the construction costs and the, you know, the skeleton of it. There's a whole other student and staff experience piece that.
Educational impact.
And, that needs to be considered as well before we
I think
move
it might-
forward.
You might be interested in that. It's a executive summary of a report on rural schools. And that's the one that talks about the sweet spot of the school being somewhere between 300 and 400 students. And it gives you a lot of talking points about the benefits of small schools versus large ones.
I think too, you know, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but, you know, the facilities improvement, the committee voted to recommend the option of a new building at the Robin Riley site in light of all of those educational impacts. You know, we kind of felt that the negative impacts on programming and education weren't worth what kind of what we're looking at potentially as a minimal cost savings in the long run. So that's why I think the majority of the committee voted that way, unless anybody has a different perspective on that.
I think it was that, as well as just the the overall size that would be the elementary school, when you talk about 700 kids, that's just, it's large. And that panned out to, you know, as far as the research being the fourth largest in the state, almost the third largest in the state. I think when people think about Litchfield, they don't think about having a top 5 as far as population elementary school in the state. And so not only, you talk about a lot of students, but then as soon as you have more students, you have more staff in the same building, and then people become less of a individual person themselves and they become more of a number. But, you know, it's not an easy decision in some cases too, because saving money is saving money, and that's important to a lot of people as well. But you look at 700 kids, that's just a lot.
Kyle, I know you had mentioned this during the previous sessions that were recorded, but for those that might be listening in tonight, could you also talk about the building aid being applicable for all options, not necessarily just the new build option?
Sure, yeah. The building aid is available for solving the problems that were pointed out in Griffin. So whether it's on one site or a different site, as long as we still achieve all the goals that we spelled out in our building aid application, then you would get the funds.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Kyle?
No, just another important piece, you know, and Kyle pointed out the timeline of it and the impact on, I keep going back to the educational impact because that's kind of my wheelhouse. You know, when we talk about impacting all 3 schools, with 2 of them with construction, and then, you know, moving the GMS students up to LMS, the staff and the students that are working in the GMS building, which we've deemed as a high need for life and safety, would benefit last from a consolidation project. The students at the middle school would move up to the high school before the students from the elementary school would be able to move out of GMS up to 3 years after the bond vote, right? And for me, what happens in that 3 years? We already know the kinds of needs that we have at that school now. What are we looking at addressing in the meantime, just to keep GMS open while we make the additions at the other 2 schools? So that's just another thing to consider.
Yeah, I feel kind of, I feel bad that I'm not able to address that question, what the cost is directly. And that's why I started right out with talking about what those differences are. I really do believe, though, in my experience, over the life of the bond, the cost difference is going to be so minimal that, to Christina's point, basing the decision on the educational value is more valuable than the possible or perceived cost savings. That long-term, people will not remember that. They'll only remember what the value of the building is from an educational standpoint.
Thank you for saying that, because I was going to follow up at that point.
Okay.
I feel pretty strongly that even if you were to tell me that this was going to save $3 or $5 million, to then have the educational experience change so drastically at our schools, to have a K through 6 and a 7 through 12, that is a major shift that, beyond the financial implications of that, we haven't even talked to what our parents are supportive of that or not. Or teachers or staff. I mean, we haven't even gone into that, because I think the question was, well, does this make sense financially? And I understand that that's a starting point, but for me, the impact otherwise of being a 2-school town with K through 6 together, that changes the environment of things so significantly.
In the pros and cons, that last page, I did spell out what the size of the additions would be, and you can do a quick calculation looking at that, $500 a square foot on new construction. So the piece that's missing is the renovations, obviously.
Right.
But, you know, so if we were to basically just build a warehouse, put the kids in it, you know, you could save possibly $6 million in the total project cost. Or, you know, over a 20-year bond, that works out to a fairly small amount, and that gets, you know, forgotten fairly easily. The reality, though, and like what David was pointing out, is that renovation projects never go the way you expect. And so that number is going to be a lot less than the $6 million. What we don't know until we have a design that we can compare. But I'm pretty confident it's going to be fairly close to the new construction.
Yeah, they're pretty similar.
So, I mean, I could do back of the napkin math, right? So 500 square feet times an 80,000 square foot building is $40 million.
Yep.
Right? We can agree to that.
Yes.
We also know, when we've talked about as a board, kind of the construction of an addition. I think it was 8 classrooms in Bow,
Yeah.
for an estimated cost of $12 million.
And that was just classrooms.
That's just classrooms,
Yep.
right? And we would need, what, 16 classrooms per school
Per
to
school,
accommodate
yeah.
the growth.
And possibly another gym, and possibly another cafeteria, you know.
Right, but just considering the classrooms alone, right? And say we need 16 classrooms, and it's 12 million for 8. You know, it's 24 million, right, per school, which is $48 million versus 40.
Right.
Again, back of the napkin math.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it you know,
Plus disruption, plus all the other items that we're talking about.
again, I'm not necessarily ready to take a vote tonight. I agree with you 100%, Andrew. We need to have all 5 members present to be able to do that. I think the information Kyle has given us, that we have here, is important for us to sort of be able to weigh out the option. Again, it's not a dollar number. We're not able to compare, apples and apples necessarily, but I think we can pull together basically enough from what he's saying to figure out that,
What's the right option moving
yeah,
forward?
what we're looking for our district and for our students.
I think Kyle, though, his professional opinion is financially, Andrew's back in the napkin math, it's gonna be fairly similar. And I think there's another piece, which is meeting educational need. When you have a new facility, you can design to exactly what it is you want that building to do. When you're retrofitting buildings, there's always gonna be that's not quite right. And that's just the reality of it, and I think we should point that out. I would also like to ask the board, because in the 2 facilities meetings, we asked the population, we asked the citizens,
Yeah.
please let us know if you have any ideas, if we've missed anything. Like, we got to make a decision here, right? The time is ticking. Did any board members receive feedback or commentary from the public?
No.
And, so we're on the heels of a postcard that went to every community member for the first set of 3 listening sessions. That produced a robust 5 options. The board settled on option number 5 as the best one going forward, and the public seemed supportive of that. We then got this last question about the consolidation. We've done due diligence, spent more time and resources to look into this, but the time is to make a decision, I think, at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the last opportunity for somebody in the public, because there's always going to be somebody with a different idea or not happy with the plan, but we got to come up with the best one and move forward. And the time is really now.
Something I meant to mention right at the beginning, and I didn't, is that I really think this was a good exercise to do, that it came up with some new information that we didn't know before. And I remember being at deliberative session when somebody mentioned it at deliberative session, well, why don't we just do this, the consolidation? And I thought at the time, it was a good idea. And so going into this, I really tried to be as objective as possible and try to lay out just the information as it is. I hope it doesn't come across that I'm pushing too hard in one direction, but it just felt it as we're going through. The more information that I started to generate, the more it made it more clear for me, and I hope it does for you.
And I think anybody who watches the 6 hours sees that, because even the smaller subcommittee meetings to help guide Kyle around that, everybody was really open to all these ideas, and we were pushing, we really need to make sure that we can answer this. We even went a little bit further into some other scenarios, right? So it expanded a little bit beyond the original scope, because you could not expand it, as we just talked our way through. And all the arrows, in my opinion, are pointing us right back to option 5, the one that was originally selected. out of, I think we ended up with 9 discussion points, and they all point back, so.
Well, someone made some, I mean, you know, one of the things we were talking about, the addition on LMS, it being off to the side in the parking lot, it started making some sense. Why don't we just separate it and have 2 school buildings right next to each other?
That's where we started.
And yeah, and then we
Went
looked
right
at,
around.
and so we looked at a lot of different things, and it all,
Yeah.
as Mike said, it just kind of boiled it back to where we started from.
Yeah. All right, well, are there any other questions for Kyle tonight?
Not at the moment. Thank you very much, Kyle.
Appreciate your time, Kyle.
Thank
and
you,
Dave.
Kyle.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
No, Dave also, thank you.
I said Dave. I said Dave, right? You heard
She
it?
did.
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Not forgetting you.
I didn't.
Okay,
Sorry.
all right. We are at community comment. Is there anyone from the community that would like to speak tonight? Hi. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close community comment. I did not receive correspondence from Liz for today. I know she did it, but I don't have it in my email box. Did you
I
receive
did
it?
not get it.
You can save it for the next meeting and have Liz do too.
That's, I think, what we're gonna do. I think that makes the most sense. So, we're gonna go ahead and move past, correspondence, and therefore, we have just shaved a half hour off our agenda. Okay,
A half
moving
hour for
on. I
correspondence.
know, we had 7 to 7:30 for that, so now we're back on track. Superintendent's report.
Yep, so the enrollment report, so we have the numbers that we had at the very end of May as our kind of June report. You can see that we're at a population of 1,203 students. We opened in September with 1,206. So our population is pretty stable and has stayed stable across the board. And just I want to point out, we also have an updated kindergarten enrollment. So between April 28th and today, June 7th, we added 1 more kindergarten number. So it looks like the kindergarten number is leveling off at that 74 where we currently are. And so that's helpful for all of us to keep in mind.
Great.
New Hampshire success story. So I got an email this morning from Griffin Roberge, who is the director, I think is the title, of the New Hampshire Department of Energy. And Griffin shared that Campbell High School has been profiled by the United States Department of Energy. And so he sent the link along. It's called Shedding Light on Savings. New Hampshire Generates Energy Savings and Better Learning Environments in Public Schools. So it's an article all about the SEED program, the fact that we were the recipient of that last year, that we used that funding in order to replace the lighting at Campbell High School. It's got 2 good photos there of what the previous lighting looked like and what the new LED lighting in the lobby of the school looked like. And we also have a photograph of Governor Sununu coming to visit and to learn about the lighting. And so we are now featured as a project and a success story, and pretty proud of that. So it's a good accomplishment for the district, for the school board, and for the community. So
That's great.
I will, like I said, that's hot off the press, but we'll be promoting that, so you can expect to see that going out in the future. The last thing is that the state of New Hampshire, Governor Sununu has sent to every single middle school and high school student in the state a bracelet. And this is the No Safe Experience campaign. And so I've already given Principal Hess his bracelets, and we'll present to Principal Grantham her bracelets. And if board members want one, you're
What does it
welcome
say?
to have one, but it says, No Safe Experience. And so this really is about promotion of drug awareness and making sure the students understand that, there should not be any experimentation, because any experience that somebody could have, especially when you're talking with some of the enhanced fentanyl drugs that are available now, that can end badly. So this is a promotional campaign, and we've got at least 355 bracelets here for Principal Grantham to take back.
Can't wait.
And the high school already has theirs, so.
Great.
And that is my report. So I was also quick, I'll point out.
Yes, thank you. Moving on, it is the first meeting of the month, so we have just an update on financial and operations report from Mr. Totten.
Yeah, so the first thing I have on there is transfers, and I want to start with an apology. They're supposed to be pre-authorized for anything over 5,000. You'll note in the list of transfers, there were several there that were not pre-authorized. So definitely moving forward, that will happen. So if we kind of go over some of the lists that were over 5,000 or under 5,000, some were just to get the budget more to align with what was actually happening. So some of the transfer had to do with the tech ed budget and phones and data. So moving some money from data to phones, because that's where the phone contract should be coming out of, type of thing. Some were to make sure that we were able to get staff in special ed when we weren't able to hire. So transferring money from salary lines to professional services or contract lines. Some were, as we were starting to get some expenses at the high school, we first transferred from an account, but then looking back at it more, we transferred back because what we wanted to do was, we realized that the booster pumps, and this does happen at other districts too, it was encumbered money from last year, and then it got impact fee money, because it was encumbered first because you don't know if you're gonna get the impact fee money. But then we transferred money back into that account, so once we got the impact fee money, the encumbrance is still gonna be there, so the encumbrance would go back to the taxpayer. So it's not showing that it's being eaten up by something else. It's showing that it's over by that revenue in a way, and the money got transferred back, so we're aware that that money, the expectation in my mind would go back to the taxpayers. So different reasons for different of those transfers. I don't know if people have questions on those or on any of the transfers.
Any questions?
I do. At our last meeting, we had kind of an initial discussion on budget transfers for the salary pool line item.
Yep.
Where are those in this file?
So we talked about that for next year. So Holly would be putting together a list of the budget transfers that would occur for fiscal year '24.
So I would say that you're still out of policy because you're now performing budget transfers, taking it from the bottom line presumably, when you have a line item for it and not properly accounting against individual salary items.
It's, the bottom line is for all salaries though.
But you have a specific line item in the budget that is used for that purpose that you're not using now when you should be. And you're bypassing the policy of budget transfers by using the bottom line and not the line item.
I mean, we can work on one for this year too.
I mean, it's done, right? And you've already bypassed the policy with it, but
So we
it
should
should
just-
be a transfer that is board approved.
Account for it in the line item.
Yeah, I mean,
I
my
don't know
understanding
what
is
other board
that,
members' thoughts are on that.
Andrew, I want to make sure I understand. So there's a big pool of, I don't even know how many, tens of thousands of dollars that are for the salary. No one transfer, I don't think, would exceed 5,000 because you'd be moving to all those individual salary lines.
Correct.
A $1,000 or $2,000 roughly raise. It's going to depend on the employee. So I don't know that it's really out of the policy thing unless you take the lump sum of the big pool being moved en masse, but it's really not. It's individual motions, individual transfers to individual salary lines.
so this year is even more complicated, this current year we're in, because it was a contract year. So there are multiple sums of money, in the lines. There's some for non-union people and their raises, and that's for admin non-union people and non-admin non-union people, but there's also the raises that go for each of the union people. So, a way to look at it too is that when it was voted on that these sums of money would funnel into those lines.
Right.
And that's exactly what has happened. So that those sums of money did not funnel into other lines. They funneled into the lines that was set for the purpose of them, which was into salaries for union and non-union people.
Which is still a transfer.
I don't want to speak for Andrew, but I think what we're looking for is an accounting of where that money went, to which people or employee IDs that it went to.
Well, for last year, it went to everybody. There would not be one person that wouldn't be touched because it was a contract year.
You're saying this year.
This year, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, this year.
So the voters approved 300, let's call it 350,000 for raises, right? So that got approved by the voters, and it's in a lump sum salary pool in the budget. And then any one individual may have seen 1,000 or 1,200, 1,500 of that. So it's really a series of small transfers to that individual account. We can give you a printout of where everybody landed, so you can see exactly where it is, but it won't be a budget printout. It would be a spreadsheet that would show what the raise was and then what the raise ended up being. So that can be provided if the board is curious
I
on it.
think
But
Andrew's point is it's not coming out of that line, it's just.
Well,
coming out-
and in clarity, I'm not necessarily talking about the contract per se that's voter approved. I'm talking about the discretionary $40,000 budget line item that is within the superintendent's purview to divvy up.
But that's for next year, I
Nope,
thought.
there's one for this year too.
And there's
Okay.
been ones
'Cause-
in past years
Yeah.
as well.
I mean,
Okay.
for the past 5 years, there's a pool, and it is used to compensate administrators, non-union members, SAU members. And so, again, we can give you a report of that. That's not a problem.
Do they exceed $5,000?
Nobody got more than 5. I don't believe. I'd have to, let me just make sure that I have that correct.
Yeah, I don't believe that's accurate. I believe there are some individuals that have.
Yeah, so let me pull that report. If that's what you would like me to be able to answer, I can tell you exactly how that was used.
Okay.
But again, I would anticipate that being a budget transfer that is board approved.
Only if it's over $5,000.
Right, but I do believe there are situations where that has already occurred and not come to the board. And my continued persistence on this is it's out of policy, right? And there were transfers that I believe have occurred that are not in alignment with our policy.
You're raising a really good question, Andrew. We'll go back, we'll take a look at that, because I think part of the challenge I'm having at the moment is it's a salary transfer. So it's a salary line to a salary line. We're not taking a salary line and moving it to a facilities line, for example. So, if it's salary money and we're using it for salary, is that what we mean by a transfer? I need clarity on that.
That is a transfer in my mind, yes.
Yeah, so I would need clarity from the board on that, because when we are bringing forward transfers, we're talking about moving salary money to contracted services, right? So that you're
Departmental.
repurposing
Right.
that money, and that's a transfer, and our intent is to bring those forward, and we've always tried to follow the policy. And so I'd want to think about this and talk further about it.
My view is if you're moving it from one line item to another line item, it's a transfer.
So if we budgeted for paper and we buy pencils instead, is that a transfer?
We could come up with a different example, but that would
Yeah.
both be supplies.
Right.
So that supplies would come from one account.
Well,
But
But we have the
if we had
issue
to
this
budget.
year of electricity being expensive, and we're gonna have to cover that, right? Utilities, and so,
Well, to Tina's point, though, it's supply money being used for supplies, different supplies, but it's supplies or supplies.
I know, it was a very
But if we had to
simplistic
kind of go from, if the science department need more supplies and we chose to grab it from the math department, that would be a transfer.
That's
So
a
the math
transfer.
department supplies to science department supplies.
but if it's under $5,000, then it doesn't need to be seen by us. That
It
is
needs to be
something,
seen by you, but doesn't need to be pre-approved by you.
correct,
Yeah.
pre-approved. So that, I think the question is the salary pool being distributed to individual salaries considered a transfer?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the first line of the policy is, in the event it becomes necessary to expend an amount greater than what was appropriated for a specific purpose. So,
I would say it's for that
non-union,
purpose.
It is for that purpose.
it's,
Right.
non-union salaries have both come up in each of the lines, as well as this pool at the bottom, which is for non-union salaries. So it's the same purpose. It's all going towards non-union salaries. And I'm not saying we're looking to hide where those salaries go to. I think it's,
But we're talking awareness versus a pre-approval,
yeah.
I think. And so I think Andrew's point is we may or may not be out of compliance with our policy if we are transferring those funds. And from the reading of that policy, can you read that line again?
In the event it becomes necessary to expend an amount greater than what was appropriated for a specific purpose.
So this amount of the salary pool was appropriated for the purpose of distributing to those salaries. I'm not sure we're exceeding that.
As long as we don't go over that amount, that pool amount.
What are your thoughts on that, Andrew?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I still don't agree, right? I still think that the transfer policy is line item to line item, and if it's over 5,000, it should be coming to us. Right? If we're moving supplies from one
Can you
department to another, it's still a transfer. It needs to come to us.
Is the policy Doug is
Yeah.
reading the same policy that you're referring to?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Is the policy that you are referring to, is it the same one that Doug just read?
Which is DBJ.
I don't have the policy in front of me. I'm going off memory.
Again, I'm just trying to understand if you're transferring line item to line item, if it's over 5,000 versus the first line about the purpose. Again,
I'll go back to the
awareness,
policy about that. And Doug, in your notes for the BA report, right? Any transfer in excess of 5,000 shall first require board approval and authorization. That's the bullet.
That is correct. Yep.
So
And
I'm going off the information that I have right at my fingertips at the moment.
and I guess the question is, what is a
What
transfer?
is a transfer?
So, for today's purposes, you're telling us about these transfers. I think perhaps for future discussion with a little research, maybe we can take up whether or not a transfer of the salary pool to salaries is considered a transfer by the board.
Do you need these transfers to be approved so that people can be paid?
We need them approved as just part of a yearly process.
Okay.
So,
What types of assurances does the board have that we're going to receive these transfers in advance per the policy? I mean, like, again, looking at this report, I'm a bit troubled because there were transfers in excess of 5,000 that have been completed. I
yeah,
believe this was also a finding in the audit report.
It was.
I don't know if the transfers was one that was finding in the audit report,
Oh, maybe it was procurement processes
so.
and
Yeah,
expenses.
Something
that
with
were-
purchase orders for sure.
So this was my mistake. I'm gonna correct the mistake. I mean, other than, you're 9 months with me now, 11 months with me now, I mean, that's what you have to go off of. So the next budget, the next thing that I have is authorization for a transfer for next year, which has been since, I owned up to this mistake, is the first due transfer over $5,000.
So I'll make a motion to approve the transfers, from this year through 5/30/2023 as outlined in the BA report.
Second. Can we make this, a monthly thing? Does that
So,
make sense?
yep, I mean,
Just to approve the transfers every
yeah,
month?
Like,
and,
as
and
part of
we
that
pre-approve
second-
anything over 5,000, but then
Right.
to also look at everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Would that help going forward?
Well, according to the policy, you're supposed to look at it at every board meeting. So you'll be getting it at every board meeting unless you guys want to change the policy. So, and then pre-authorizing anything over 5,000
Okay,
before it even makes the transfer list.
thank you for owning up to that. Appreciate it.
Any other questions for Doug from the board regarding the transfers through 5/30/2023? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the transfers as of 5/30/2023, please say aye. Aye.
Roll
Oh,
call
roll
vote,
call. Yep, you got me. Dang it. Okay, Peter,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Heidi, aye. So it is 4-0-0.
So an action item I'm adding to the agenda is it'll have transfers on there. So in the future, it'll be every agenda.
Yep.
And have we answered, before we go off transfers, I just want to make sure we've answered the question about salaries, or what does the board want us to provide?
We have not. So I think for the next 2 weeks, we should look at the policy. I want to take a better look at the full and complete policy, the one line as well as the rest of it. And then I think that can be part of old business next week to have a discussion on, what is defined by this board as being a transfer. Depending on its, with the purpose language. Is everybody in
Yeah,
agreement
that
with
makes
that?
sense.
Does that
Just
make
review
sense?
that
What is
policy.
what is the policy number? Does anybody know that off the top of their head?
DBJ.
EBJ.
It's not off the top of my head, but it was in the document, so. I don't know them that well.
Impressive.
Right.
And troubling at the same time.
All right, Doug, what else you got
All right,
for us?
So seeking authorization for transfer in amount over 5,000. So several different positions are becoming more and more harder to fill within the state. One is speech pathologist. So we weren't able to fill the fourth one last year. They've been advertising for a while to fill the fourth one for going into next year. They're getting nothing. I think maybe they got one person apply and they wanted over $100,000. So we believe we can fulfill the IEP services that are written into students' IEPs with contracting out, and that contract out would be a transfer to professional services of the salary line of the vacated position, and in the contract, it would say not to exceed the $57,836. So what I'm seeking is permission to transfer for salary from speech to professional services for speech. So it's staying within speech.
And it's going to be marked as speech. It can't then be used somewhere else.
Can't be used somewhere else. And, if it's over over 5,000, I would come back and ask. I don't see us using that someplace else because
We need
we
speech.
need those services.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of $57,836 from 2150 speech services to account 110 salaries to account 330 professional services.
I will second. Any questions? Andrew, any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Seeing none, we will do a roll call vote. All those in favor of Tina's motion, for lack of having to repeat the whole thing. Peter?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Heidi, I'm an aye. So that is 4-0-0.
All right, so the next thing is a link which has been livened up today, and that is where we are with end of year. No real changes from last time as far as projecting somewhere around 900,000 of expenses under budget, as well as revenue that exceeded what we had projected. Part of that revenue which exceeded is that 132,000, which came from the state, which the purpose of that is to reduce taxes. And then we had other revenue that exceeded of 201,000. So that takes us to about $1.2 million. So with that 1.2 million, there are things that we have to do, and then things that the school board has choices on doing. We have to get our food service account to zero at the end of every year. So if we transfer 50,000 into that, that would get us either to zero or a little bit above. You know, we're starting to narrow down what our expenses are for the year, but, you know, it's matched between revenue and expenses for that as well. We gave a worst-case scenario a couple months ago. We believe will be less than that worst-case scenario, as we've been tracking it since then. So if we transfer 50,000, that would take care of that. Then there were 3 warrant articles which were approved by the residents of Litchfield. Those all can be fully funded and therefore need to be fully funded. So that is the $350,000. And then the next 2, one I put in like an optional required. Both of them are part of our capital projects fund, which we have to get to zero at the end of the year. So the first one I put as optional required but expected, because we knew from the start of this year that there was going to be a gap and that we were going to have to transfer money from the general fund. So that gap is going to be around $116,000. The reason why I put it was optional is because the general fund is not the only way you can get that money. We can go into reserve or trust funds, but the reason I put it as expected for the transfer is because that's how we've talked about it the whole year. We would look to make sure we had money at the end of the year from the general fund to cover that gap. So the next one I put in with the optional, and that's transfer the capital projects for the elementary expenses, because elementary, you know, the thinking was we'd use a capital improvement expendable trust fund for those pre-bond expenses. Now, you have the option just to use the general fund, which would then not deduct money from that trust fund. So that's that 60,000. Either one, I would like to know today, hopefully, which direction you want to go, because if we take money out of expendable trust fund, we have to have a public hearing. And I would prefer to have that public hearing before the year is over, which would be our next school board meeting, and we have to advertise in enough time before that as well.
And this is the $60,000.
This is the 116,000 and the 60,000. Now, we couldn't do both of those out of the capital improvement expendable trust fund because there's 125,000 in there, and I don't think anybody wants to go into the building maintenance or anything like that. Again, the expectation, I think, from the start of the year was that 116 would come from the general fund. And that's what I would still recommend. And then the 60 is an option. I would switch my recommendation now to have it come from the general fund. That would leave more money in the expendable trust fund. And then everything else after that are options. I brought up the radios and the blue lights last time. Again, I always start with safety. I wish we could start with just learning being our focus, but with the world that we live in, it's safety first. You know, the residents trust us with their kids, and we need to make sure that we can communicate as effectively as we can if anything does happen. So we talked about those 2 last time, and then the board asked for kind of what was on the list last year that didn't get funded, as well as what are some other ideas for people. So the Gator was on the list. We decided not to purchase it because, again, we were watching our expenditures. We had it last time for $7,800. We bumped it up to $85,000 just because everything has gone up. So, and then we had fireproof cabinets on the list last time. We bumped those up, I think, by $500. And then there is some other things that are new. The LMS Wi-Fi, again, GMS and CHS, they are going to a new system. This would allow us to bring all 3 buildings to the new system, which would increase the ability to have guests on the Wi-Fi as well. So that's, you know, that's both a learning and a safety thing together, because again, it's communication. The ADA swing that was on the list, that again, there was different positives and negatives with that. Part of that was we don't even think we have a big enough space at GMS necessarily to put it in, and if we did, we'd possibly put a fence around it. And then what are the optics of that to put a fence around an ADA swing? And then a new one that got added was the multi-year reading contract. So They went through the pilot this year, and then so they'd be purchasing the reading program. So Mary was able to get an upfront price, so it's $75,000 for year one, and that's what we have budgeted for next year. If we, instead of $75,000, if we pay $128,500, we would have access for 5 years of the reading program. So part of the reading program, tends to be books that you hold on to, and part of it tends to be the consumables that you buy, or the online access that you buy every year as well. So that would be kind of getting 5 years for the price of 3. So an option in order to kind of save money later on. Auditorium upgrades at the high school, we haven't been able to get a quote for that yet. The CHS PA system, $33,000. So the other PA systems were updated, I don't know, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago to a Bogan system, and the CHS is now the oldest one, and it's, when anything happens to the system, it's harder to fix that system than the other two current newer systems. LMS stage curtain, Jen has asked for a quote, and they said it was going to come Friday or Monday, last Friday or Monday, and it still hasn't come.
Still waiting.
So we're still waiting for that, but the curtain has a rip in it, and the reason the rip happened was, a middle school kid, surprise, surprise, was messing around, but should that action really resulted in a rip? Probably not. It's resulted in a rip because the curtain is now old.
And Jen, the quote you were getting was not only the front curtain, but if you look at the back wall, the stage is not in great shape. So I think you were trying to quote curtaining, so it would be a little bit more professional looking around.
Do you want me to tell you what I quoted, what they're
Please.
quoting me?
Yeah.
So they're quoting a new front curtain. The curtain that we have right now is held together literally by safety pins. It had a rip about 6 feet long in an accidental middle schooler activity. But it's because it's threadbare. It just
Dry rot.
is just disintegrating in your own hands. If someone runs into it wrong or something happens, it's literally falling apart. So looking at the front curtain, the front, I forget the name of the
Banner?
top.
Banner.
Balance.
Balance something across the top.
Curtains.
And then they're going to do a black curtain across the whole back of the stage to kind of cover up where the soundproofing, for the better words or less, the egg carton that is there right now that you put on your bed that is on the back of the wall to prevent the sound from the music room and the stage to travel between the two. It will cover that up and make it will be a nice solid black curtain across the whole back of the stage, which would be
Much nicer.
a much nicer optic. And
I think this one is where a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if you don't, can you take a picture and send that to the school board as far as what the back of the stage looks like now?
absolutely.
So,
I can say
It's deteriorating.
I can attest that the curtain is absolutely beyond its useful life.
It's really pretty, Andrew. Come on, we worked really
No.
hard to put that back together.
It's gross and disgusting, simply put.
I know we don't have an actual, a quote put in by the CHS admin, but I can speak a little bit to the auditorium
That'd be great.
upgrades for sound. So after the Wizard of Oz, when we had the wonderful production of Wizard of Oz, we were not able to use the CHS sound system or the microphones that we had at CHS because there are lots of problems with the sound system at the CHS auditorium. So Val, knowing that she wanted to have a big, beautiful show, was able to, she had 2 contacts in Londonderry who brought their soundboard, their microphones, and their repeaters so that we could have decent sound for the show, The Wizard of Oz. If you went to see the Puffs show, the sound was very different because we didn't have those things. So microphones cut out on occasion. You could hear students breathing when they weren't on stage. Everything was manually operated by, moving up and down slides. It's an analog system, which doesn't work beautifully with, digital sound things that, sound effects and sound cues that we want to be able to use when we're putting on a show. So the the first ask is for a new soundboard for the CHS auditorium. I believe the price is about $6,000. And that would be kind of the first step in some ongoing improvements that need to be made at the auditorium. Things like when they ran the speaker wires, they didn't use speaker wires, they used Cat5, which, is not audio wired, so you have much more loss when you're going from the back of the auditorium, or from the stage to the back of the auditorium and then up through the speakers again. So Dan is putting together a kind of a wish list, and kind of a scope and sequence of how, and he's working with Jake on this, and Nate Lammy, how we would like those upgrades to benefit the students and the staff and the town, because CHS, the auditorium, is used for all three schools, concerts, awards presentations, deliberative sessions, informational sessions, parent forums. So if we can get the sound working properly, it'll benefit everybody. So that's kind of the bid at this point. And what was the CHSPA system? Is that from the office to all the classrooms?
That's the PA
Office.
system throughout
Yeah.
the entire building.
Okay.
It's a simplex system that's original to the building, so it's 23 years old. There are areas of the building that are not covered. It has not worked well in the gym, and it doesn't work in the auditorium, we're learning, which is kind of
That was,
interesting.
didn't we find that out when we did the
Oh.
drill?
Yeah.
Yep.
That it didn't work and I think you had asked how long that's been that way.
Yeah, and it's been, the one in the gym has been a long-standing issue, because I know it was in the NEASC report from 2018. The auditorium, it just seems like it never got put in there. I guess they didn't want to interrupt a play.
Oh,
But,
gosh.
the problem is that if you have a group of students in the auditorium and there's an event that you need to announce and communicate, it's difficult. You can't hear. So we really want to take a look at the whole PA system there and get it on a similar Bogan system to what we have at the other two schools. So then you can call one person in, not somebody to repair this one and somebody to repair that one. So try to simplify.
Any opportunity to move these to potential warrant articles?
Yeah, I mean, these are presented as being options, so,
I think that would be wise, honestly, to whatever we want to spend of unused funds is to put it to the warrant article, given the events of the last 18 or 24 months. I think it's a smart play. The safety, what do you have it here? Is required or optional required? I think those, they're required. I think the rest, I think we prioritize them and we put them on a warrant. And which means it's gonna be a lot of warrants, but I think it would do wonders for our reputation.
We would want to just discuss, I think, safety, because one might argue that LMS Wi-Fi is a safety matter, especially when,
I do.
you want to argue?
No, I agree with you. It's a
I'm sorry.
safety issue. in my opinion.
agreeing with you.
When the power went off last Friday and we had a dance there, we had a principal who had to step out on a front sidewalk and hold a cell phone up and touch a flagpole in order to get a signal, because there were no phones in the building. So, no Wi-Fi. So I think, that's something that we would want to take a look at from a safety angle. One
think
might
the air as
argue
well.
that the CHSPA system, because it is about communication, we all know in Alice, the letter C stands for communicate. You got to let people know what's going on. And I is informed, that's right. C's not communicate. But anyway, it's counter, sorry. I is informed. Thank you for that correction. But, we would want to take a look at those items.
so to go over the last two, I'll do the LMS surge, and then Mike's gonna do the DC trip. So we met with, the electrical engineers and the electricians yesterday, I guess it was, and the architects. So because you're talking about a large building and you're talking about a large amount of electricity coming in and then feeding multiple mechanical systems, it starts with a design from an electrical engineer. So we got that design yesterday, and then that design flows to the electrician company, who then prices it out. They price out the components as well as the labor that will go in there. So we've asked them to price it out two ways. One is with two main surge protectors, which would really work with the electricity coming off the Eversource grid. And what it would do is it would allow the normal amount of electricity to pass through and then dump any excess. So that's one way they're gonna price it out. The second way they're gonna price it out is that, as well as some additional surge protections to the major HVAC equipments down the line from that. So once we get both those prices, and they're working on pricing that out now, we would bring that back to the board.
The last item is the DC trip. So this is an idea that I had. We still have not solved the DC trip question. We have students who had fundraised about $14,000 worth of credit toward the trip to DC that didn't occur. Those students are currently juniors. They're going to be seniors next year. Every effort that we've had to come up with ideas of how to make them feel whole, you know, from the parking idea, but not everybody parks, to it's like this rabbit hole of we can't quite figure it out. And I am proposing that the board consider a one-time donation to the senior class, that it would go into student funds. It would be $10,000. It would be available to all students to benefit. So, for example, this year's senior class did the Boston Harbor Cruise, and they paid out of pocket for that. And so this would be a way to sort of make it whole. I think the community, you know, even when we've heard from parents, everybody's trying to find a way to make kids who got overlooked on the DC trip, who had already done fundraising for it. And that's the difference between current students, where the DC trip is not something we're currently considering, but this group that did fundraising and was out there in good faith, it would allow some way to sort of make this whole and draw it even and allow them to graduate with a little bit of a senior trip opportunity to help make that up. So it's just a concept that I'm tossing out to the board, and I think it would go a long way with parents and with certainly the students.
I absolutely support this. We had talked about potentially a warrant article at one point. We had talked about putting it in the budget for next year at one point. We had talked about different options for this, and I think $10,000 that benefits the senior class in a way that they can decide, with obviously advisors, and how it would be distributed and used, would be helpful, whether it's they choose to do a field trip or whether it's they choose to put it towards senior week and senior activities. I think this would be helpful to them. And again, the hope was we would be able to give them some of that money back if we could, if we had the option. And for most of the year, we weren't certain that was a possibility. But we do have that option now, and I think it definitely goes a long way.
So we're at the second to last meeting in June. We got one more to go. If I could ask kind of the thoughts on the 116 and the 60, if we go back up, the transfers of the capital projects fund in regards to the expenses this year that we need to cover. Because again, if we want to take, we'll have to fund some or all with general fund, and then the remaining that we don't choose to fund with general fund, with the capital improvement expendable trust fund, which has a balance of about 125,000 in it right now. If we're choosing to fund any with that fund, then that next board meeting, we would have that public hearing at it as well.
So are we putting another 125,000, is that to the capital improvement fund? Is that one of the 125s that was referenced prior?
Yep.
That is, yep. So
But that's not the
so-
125 you're talking about, it's gonna be
Correct.
250.
It'll be
I mean, 250.
Yeah, there's
Yep.
125 in there. This will put another 125 in for 250. And, you know, we heard the presentation from Kyle tonight. There are costs to get an article to warrant. And so those could be paid out of the 250 if the board opted to use fund balance in order to take care of this. We would then have 250 to work with as a budget for the work that we need to do. I mean, if we think about it, we've got promoting the, whatever it is we land on, you know, there's a lot of stuff to come. Or what I'm hearing Doug say is basically use the 125 in there, leaving a little bit of money, and then put only 125 in, so you'd have half the budget roughly to work with if you didn't use this fund balance. And my recommendation, and I think it's Doug's too, but I'll let him speak for him. My recommendation is that we utilize the fund balance because we've got a lot of work to do and we need to get this right. And trying to do it on a shoestring budget, we're not gonna go crazy on it, but we just need to make sure we have the funds to get done what we need to do.
I heard loud and clear, I think, from the town and from when we had that forum about this situation, that we needed to figure out a way to get our capital reserves, back up.
Back up, yep.
And so I feel like having the 125 in there and spending it on either the 116 or the 60, and then putting another 125 in there is 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I think this is a way to, if we use fund balance, we are keeping our balance, we are refilling those reserves, which is what we wanted to do, while still giving an incredibly sizable amount back to the taxpayers that is higher than any amount in the last 4 years except for the COVID year. I'm not sure I'm in favor of all the other optional use of funds, but for those two, my leaning would be to use fund balance for the capital projects.
For the 116 and the 60?
Yeah. Because then the expendable fund would have 250 in it, correct? And we would be able to use that for the expenses necessary for getting ready for a warrant.
GMS
Or
and
GMS.
beyond,
Yeah.
right?
Beyond.
If it doesn't cost that much and for the
Right.
pre-bond work, if the bond passes, then we have a lot of work to do.
I mean, we had, remind me what this balance was before we had to touch it? It was like 650?
Yeah, it was,
It was 619.
Yeah, so I mean, only keeping 125 in it is a fifth of where we were. And again, we were using it for expenses, but I just, with such a large project coming up, I feel like we need to have money in that fund to do that. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, I'm not set in stone, but that's my initial reaction.
I think I agree, Heidi, but I view the 116 and the 60 a bit differently, right?
Yep.
The 60 I view absolutely as elementary costs and costs associated with whatever the next step is
Yep.
that we agree upon.
Yep.
And I agree that should be used from the unexpended general fund. On the 116, I view that and correct me if I'm wrong, these are predominantly costs associated to the middle school work that are as a result of the not having enough money in the loan, right? The Bank of America, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So I do think that there is a different, even though they're labeled the same, I do think there is a material difference between the two asks.
Yeah, and that's why I separate them out into both lines, because I would agree with you.
So I'm sorry, Andrew, can you clarify which one do you think we should be using the fund for, and which one do you think we should be using on the fund balance for?
I think we should be using the trust fund for the 116, and I think we should be using end of year underspend on the 60.
I view it as,
The
well,
opposite, right?
I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know. My position on this has always been, we're given a budget by the voters. We're agents to expend that budget as we need to do for our schools. And I know that that's a very different opinion than some other people on the board, and I accept that, that's fine. But like Heidi mentioned, when we had that meeting on September 19th and following, we heard loud and clear that any funds that left over at the end of the year need to replenish the capital projects fund and need to pay off the balance. We have to end this year at zero balance in the capital projects fund. So I don't I don't really see a big difference in, I mean, it either comes out of the fund or it comes out of the year-end funds. I think coming out of the year-end funds leaves more of a balance in the capital projects fund for if we have continued increasing costs, and then it's there for GMS. I don't know,
I do hear that. I'm just in my mind, I'm not sold either way at the moment, just for everyone's reference, but in my mind, I feel like the 116 specifically is being asked to be funded by tax dollars, right?
It's all tax dollars.
Essentially, our tax dollars are covering the deficit for this current year when we have a fund that can be used to cover that deficit. Although I don't agree that that's the best use of those funds, I think that's a viable option for use.
So what I would say about the 116 is when we presented to the town, we also presented that we were going to be lean on our budget this year, so we would have that fund balance at the end of the year to make up the difference. And we also presented that to staff. And while we were at a much larger fund balance than we thought, we would have been at a less fund balance if we could have hired the positions we were always looking to hire. But we presented to staff in a way too, like, hey, you can get things that are necessary for learning, but you can't necessarily get everything, because we have to end up with a fund balance to pay this difference, because we don't want to go back to the taxpayers or use a different way. We want to kind of handle it ourselves, not spend as much, so we can pay the difference with this year's money. So that's how we presented it to the taxpayers, and that's how we presented it to the staff. The staff did a phenomenal job. Again, they were put in a tough position. I talked about them being put in a tough position during COVID. And then, when the kids came back, and then the kids were all impacted by COVID, and then we put them in another tough position too, and they did great with it. So in my mind, that's why I put the word expected there, because no matter who we talked about using the general fund, tightening the bootstraps, using the general fund for that. Again, that's how I see it. And then the other one, we did talk about using the capital improvement expendable trust fund. And again, that was to match up with the town, because the town, rightfully so, became upset when we used that for other reasons. And the 60,000 for the elementary school would be more in line with what the town would expect us to use it with. So that's where my recommendations are coming from. And then I didn't know we were going to have another 60,000 to possibly use for that, so that's why I put that as an option. I think using the capital improvement expendable trust fund makes a lot of sense, because that's the whole purpose of the fund. But then also leaving it at 125,000 and then putting in another 125,000 also makes sense, because like we stated a couple of minutes ago, it was at 619,000. The goal was to have it as high as possible.
So like Andrew said, I'm not necessarily set in stone, but my leaning would be to have both funded by the year-end balance. But if that's not something the full board is comfortable with, then to have the 116,000 funded by the year-end balance and the 60,000 come out of the expendable trust would be what I would lean towards if the rest of the board was comfortable with that.
Do you need votes on these tonight? I know you want them as soon as possible.
So here's the thing. I think Doug wants them as soon as possible. Again, we can do it. We have 4 people, first of all, which is an even number, so we could break 2-2, which we might need our tiebreaker. But my concern right now is we are looking at, for our 6/21 meeting, voting on the direction of GMS and having an actual vote on that. Mary's presentation regarding the grading and reporting recommendations and changes, which I think is going to be a significant discussion. And then if we add end of the year expenses and expenditures to that, we are setting ourselves up for a very long meeting on the 21st, which I'm fine with, but I just want to make sure there's that awareness to punting all of these things to the 21st.
Right, and I get that, but where we don't have estimates for several of the items, we haven't, Liz isn't part of this discussion, and I'd rather do it as a full board than.
Agreed.
And if I may, I think you have two questions, right? So, the question tonight really is direction on the 116 and 60.
Okay.
I think a motion to do something would be in order and to get a vote on it and see where we land.
Okay.
Because if it is to take it out of the expendable trust fund, we need to post a hearing,
Okay.
right? So
And that would
that
be
just
at our
takes us
next
time.
meeting,
And then we would
right.
have to take that action after, but we need direction on whether to take the time to post that and to have a public hearing, because that requires a legal process,
Mm-hmm.
right? Versus if the board tonight says, nope, we're comfortable taking it out of fund balance, and then we'll consider all the rest of the list next meeting, we don't have to go through the process of posting anything.
Yeah. The other thing we had talked about was maybe using the technology reserve fund for the LMS Wi-Fi upgrade.
We did, but then I think you went back and you met with Chris, and Chris is like, ooh, I really want to hold that off just in case we actually do have worst-case scenario.
Okay.
And worst-case scenario could also be, which some local school districts have had too, when
Yep.
they've been infiltrated, and then they have to either pay money to get information back or go in a different direction, which costs money as well.
Yeah,
I
okay,
mean, look at the awful situation in Nashua, that,
yeah.
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 they had their
I
whole system
totally
corrupted and
understand that.
tied up. So
Okay. Mm-hmm.
that's more of that kind of emergency funding perhaps now.
Okay.
It's awful to say, but,
Yeah,
and you might get insurance money a year later, but
Right.
you've got to fix the system yesterday, so.
So I'm gonna make a motion to have the board authorize the balance of the 116,000 come from the year-end fund balance.
you want to do 2 votes?
I wanna do 2 votes, because I think they should be separate.
Okay, I'll second that.
Any other questions or concerns on that? Seeing none, roll call vote.
So, hold on, sorry, I was
Oh,
getting off
not-
mute. This is paying the deficit from end-of-year funds.
This is paying the 116 with end-of-year funds, not using the expendable trust fund.
Okay?
We are indicating our intent to not need to have a hearing at least about the 116, and we're gonna address the 60 in a minute.
Okay,
So
thank
the
you.
hearing would occur at the next
Yeah.
meeting?
If we need to have, if we are choosing as a board to pay this off through the trust fund, correct?
Yep.
I think you reminded me through discussion this evening that that was actually the will of the community in September. Right, and it was the other way around, right, with the 60K being an approved cost for the capital improvement, but the 116, we shouldn't drain our accounts to pay that. That should be money we
Yep.
have.
Yep.
Correct?
Correct.
Yep.
That's the way I'm feeling right now.
Yep, got it, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, roll call vote, on the motion to use year-end funds, to pay the $116,000. Peter?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye,
Heidi, I'm an aye, so that passes 4-0-0. I would like to then make a motion. Well, I don't know how this works. So do we motion first, or do we do it after the public hearing?
If you make a motion to pay the 60,000 out of
Year-end.
year-end fund,
Right.
right? Which is what we're recommending, and it fails, we will then do the public hearing route. So it's just a way to have a motion that gives us direction, because if you are not in favor of paying it out of there, we have to pay it, and that means we'll post a meeting and have a hearing next time. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep.
You're pausing.
So, well, right now, without anything happening, it would get paid out of the fund balance. And the only way for it to get paid out of the capital expendable trust fund is for you to have a public hearing.
Right.
And then to, after the public hearing, vote at that point.
So you would rather have a motion to direct us to do that?
I need direction as far as, do you want a public hearing or not?
Okay, well, without doing a motion then, can the board weigh in on what your thoughts are in terms of the 60,000? Are you leaning towards the using year-end funds, or are you leaning towards using the expendable trust?
Expendable trust.
Year-end funds.
Peter?
I think the trust.
So it would,
So it looks like we're going to a hearing.
right.
And then after the hearing, if you don't choose to vote on it, then we would use fund balance. And if you choose to vote on it and it passes, then we'd use a trust fund. And if it doesn't pass, we would use fund balance.
Okay.
So even though it's in the optional column, at the end of this year, it has to go to
Has to be
zero.
paid,
It has to go to
right.
zero.
Right.
We have to
So-
pay our bills. The question is, what count are we using to do it? I think from today, even if I voted with Tina, it'd still be a 2-2 vote. It would, to me, that indicates we should have the public hearing.
Yep.
So we should plan on a public hearing. I don't think we need to have a further vote than that, and we've given you that indication. We could still, at the next meeting, choose to use year-end funds to pay that 60,000, even having that public hearing.
Yep,
If that's, we have all 5 of us here and that's the will of the board,
yeah.
right?
That
Do
is
you
correct.
want the public hearing at 5:30? Do we want to start it a little bit early? What do we want to do?
So I feel like we've been sticking with a 5:30 start. I feel like we should stay with that
Consistent.
5:30 start.
Okay, so we'll
But I think
start
we
with the
should-
public hearing
Start with public hearing
and then go from there.
and then
Okay.
move into our board meeting. But I'm telling board members now, expect a long night.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you
Your
for,
Wheaties before you come to the board meeting. You're gonna need them.
thank you for direction, and at this point, are we voting on anything else, or are we just waiting to the full
I
board?
think we need to get all of the estimates in,
Yep.
so we can then weigh priority. And again, I think Andrew brings up a good point, and Peter, about some of these things could be a warrant article, not all of them, but I think, to me, not all of them, but I think some of them could be. I think some of them, like the radios and the blue lights and certain things, are more safety, that we need to have that, and the LMS Wi-Fi, that we as a board have the authority to make that decision, but I think there are some that could potentially go to warrant, so
I think, if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt, the multi-year reading contract just makes sense to me, to pay for a 3-year contract, get the 5 years at a 3-year price. We're saving taxpayers 2 years of reading contract money, right? So I think it makes sense for us to pay ahead on that, so that we don't have to ask taxpayers for that in the next 2 budgets. Does that make sense?
That's why it's on there.
It's always good to save money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For me, it's kind of a, let's just do it.
And honestly, Mary was ecstatic when she got the price back for 5 years, because she had been talking 3, and they came back with 5 at that amount, and she was like, wow. So,
yeah.
it's a big saving.
I think that makes fiscal sense. I mean, is there any reason why we wouldn't continue with that reading program for that long?
It's a new one for next year.
If you're gonna go through the process of training and adopting.
Yeah, 5 years is a
And
good.
starting kids in it, you need to do 5 years. You need to stick
That
it
would
out.
be
You
my
don't
only concern, is
keep
5 years
switching.
normal, and I don't know
Pretty
that.
standard.
Well,
5 years, yeah.
Five's the
Because there's a
minimum.
lot of training that goes into it, so
Yeah.
you'd want that to carry forward.
Yeah.
5 to 7 is really what
Mm-hmm.
you should be aiming for. But that can wait.
We can
right?
wait
Yeah.
until next
Yeah.
week. I think the rest of these, we wait until the 21st. The other thing I'll throw out there, I mean, I don't necessarily, I'm not advocating for it, but in at least the 2 years that I've been on the board, we've had another meeting in addition to our last board meeting. We've had one like the 29th or the 30th of June to do
This
just
Clean
this,
up, yeah.
just the end of the year budget transfers, expenditures and whatnot. And so that's also an option if we want to save 621 for the GMS direction and vote, and then the grading and reporting, and then we do expenditures. We have another meeting on it. I'm just throwing it out there to think about. But I mean, ideally, we get it all done in our regular board meeting. That'd be great, but.
And I think some reasons you might have that is because you're trying to figure out, can you afford, things that you want? And where this year, we know we're gonna give back a healthy fund balance anyways, so it's a little less about getting to the nearest 1,000, because this year,
Last
you
year.
have the opportunity to give.
I feel like last year we were still trying to figure out what our year-end balance was.
Well, and again, this is estimated year-end
Right,
balance.
right.
So.
So could something significant happen between 6:21 and 6:30?
Significant, no, but
It could be a lightning strike at the high school.
Never know.
Well, that's, I mean, we just had that.
and
Yeah.
that just got put into the insurance, so that's
Yeah.
an insurance claim type of thing.
Right.
So, yeah, I
What
mean,
was that point? Was that the CHS?
yeah,
Yeah, that was my question here just before we close the year-end spending is there any cost that we need to plan as a result of whatever the events happened at CHS?
so that should run through an insurance. So we've been in contact with Primex, our insurance company. We're waiting for the invoices. We get the invoices, we forward them to Primex. But I mean, that one's luckily pretty simple. Hopefully would be a lightning strike, so a natural thing for insurance to cover.
All right, so for now, we'll plan to deal with it at the meeting on the 21st, and we'll call that. But if anyone has any thoughts on whether or not to have another meeting at the end of the year, let me know.
Thank you.
Anything else from you, Doug?
No, that's it.
All right, thank you. Public minutes from May 24th?
If I may, we're at the 8 o'clock public.
Oh, yeah.
In case somebody wants to.
Yes, oh, we have public. Yes, come on up. Thank you for reminding me. Not used to having public. Welcome. Please identify yourself.
Dan Harrison, 95 Pinecrest, and full disclosure, I'm Tina's assistant. I wanted to talk about one of these items that you've just been discussing. I was at home watching and came down. I think you were off base. I think your perspective missed a major point. It's a relatively minor expense. It's the soundboard for CHS, which, as Tina said, I've without an educational discount, it's about $6,000 out of a $24 million budget. Music classes in our schools are a 4-credit course. Performance is a competency. It is required for graduation. It is required to get credit in those courses, and they have to perform. They need a space to perform, and the soundboard in our space is unusable. I just tonight spent 2 hours running that soundboard for senior awards night. It is unusable. It is garbage. It needs to be replaced. And this is not a want, this is not an extra, this is not a nice to have. This is, you offer a music department that has music classes that have a competency called performance. They need to perform, and you owe them a place to perform and the equipment to do it. So please consider what is really a relatively minor expense. Furthermore, the Performing Arts Department, separate from music, Performing Arts is an extracurricular. They raised somewhere around $20,000 with the Wizard of Oz ticket sales. Surely you can find $6,000 of that to improve their space. They earned it. It's not taxpayer money to give back. It's their money. They earned it. Please consider giving that back to them in the form of a soundboard they can use. Thank you.
Thank you. No questions, but I'll ask it during school board comments. Anybody else in the audience? No? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close community input. Thank you for your community input. Moving on to the public minutes from May 24th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the public minutes from May 24th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor? Oh, nope. Roll call vote and bleh. Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Peter?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Heidi is an aye, so that passes 4-0-0. All right, we're moving into our policy. Back to new business and policy, which is the dress code. Second reading.
So I updated for the board. I think I got this right. If you click the link, it will bring you to proposed policy JICA and GBEBA. You can see the comments that are on the side. We've added that first comment on personal responsibility. We've added the picture in so that you can see that, made it clear it's the entire torso in a normal standing position, which is an improvement over the language that was there. Article 3 talks about footwear needing to be worn at all times, and it deletes all of the reference to pajamas. It was weird that that was in a shoes section anyway, but Article 4 has reverted back to the original language, and we have now struck the CHS staff may choose to permit hats in the classroom, so there will be no hats permitted at Campbell if this is approved. Additional requirements, we clarified by taking out number 3 because it was covered by 1 and 2. And those are the changes that you are looking at. So this is what the board asked for, and I lost track. We counted that as a first read, or are we back to a first read?
This is a second read.
This is a second read. So for a second read, that is where yes, because we have final approval.
Can you go back up to the hats one? Because, so where is that for? So I click into a different thing than you're clicking in, and I'm probably clicking in what the public's clicking into.
Yep.
And it's not the stuff has the lines on it.
I
Just
got
so
it.
you
So what is being approved is Article 4 is headgear, including hats, hoods, and caps are permitted for religious, medical, or other reasons by school administrators. That's been the existing policy. And we are striking the comment that CHS staff may choose to permit hats in their classrooms. So they would only be allowed for religious, medical, or other reasons. And if you remember, the original draft from the committee had recommended to expand the hats to LMS. And so now we've taken that out and we're taking it back away from CHS.
So I still feel pretty strongly about how I felt before. We received some correspondence in about it from the same person, I think multiple emails. I did have conversations with different people. One thing that I'm going to point out that was said to me that I hadn't considered was the fact that this allows an exception for medical or other reasons deemed by school administration. And so from a parent whose child medically chooses to wear a hat, has sensory that they would be allowed to wear their hat on this, the parent's concern was that this is now calling a bullseye to their kid who is going to be one of the few people who are going to be wearing a hat, and it is going to lead to discussion in the classroom of how come Johnny gets to wear a hat and I don't get to wear a hat, that's not fair. And it will highlight the students who may need to or may choose to, or whatever their reason is to wear a hat, versus them being able to blend in and wear a hat with whoever else. Again, I'm only raising this because it was brought to me. It wasn't something I had considered. I thought it was a good point, and so I wanted to go ahead and share that with the board. I still feel like I don't have any skin in this game. My kids don't wear hats. They just don't. But I feel like we put together a committee. We asked students what they thought. We asked staff what they thought. The committee came up with recommendations and provided them to the board. And it's disheartening to acquire the community feedback and to ask a committee and task them to do the work on this and then not only pull back what they have recommended, but then change the policy even further by taking it away from the school that didn't even know they were on the chopping block, meaning CHS. And so while we all have our personal opinions on whether hats are appropriate or not, I feel like this, the comments I heard was, I don't want to fight this battle. And I think we're hearing that on both ends. I don't want to fight this battle if you say no hats, because then I have to deal with the kids who want to wear their hats. And I don't want to fight this battle if you say yes to hats and I don't want them to have a hat. So my recommendation, and I sat on the board, on the committee, was to follow committee recommendation. So I will be voting no on this policy.
I will also be voting no. I would prefer to follow the recommendation from the committee.
And I have the same position I had last meeting. I will vote yes.
Understood? Andrew, did you want to weigh in, or you just want to go to a vote? I mean, I think we're going to be at 2-2. This is going to fail, and we're going to have to, the policy either stays as is or comes back for another, when we have a full board here.
So Heidi, to your point, I've also had a lot of conversations with many different community members on the sidelines of different events over the past couple of weeks on this one, and the general consensus was, don't really care either way. There were some students that I've definitely spoken to that spoke strongly for it, some parents that spoke against it. So it's truly, mixed feedback, and this is a tough decision, right? I certainly appreciate the work the committee has done, and I'm just questioning whether it makes sense to also have full board support for this before we take a vote.
What do you mean by that? Sorry, I was taking a drink.
Like,
To have
we
Liz
just need to
here.
wait
So-
for Miss McDonald to join the board before we make a vote on this.
Okay, we can table it. Is that what the group wants to do? I mean,
Sure.
I don't want to see it fail because of a tie,
It
so.
says she's on her way.
Oh, Liz is on her way, so maybe we table it 5 minutes. Did you hear that, Andrew? Liz is on her way here.
Yeah, I did hear that. Yep.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we put a pause and we'll put a pin in this one and we'll move on to job descriptions and we'll give Liz the chance to get here and settled. We'll give Liz a minute to get settled. So we're gonna go ahead and move into job descriptions. Can you talk to us about those, Mike?
Sure can.
Services?
So, I'm not gonna close that, I'm going to leave it open. So job descriptions, you have 3 that are presented to you tonight. The first is the dining services director or food services director. Lauren prefers dining services. And so her job description has been updated. We had noticed that there was a conflict that existed between her individual contract and what the job description said. So we've aligned that, and we've also aligned some of the job responsibilities for her. You want to take these one by one, or?
Yes, one by one.
Okay, so that's Lauren's dining services director job description.
Okay, I'll make a motion to, are there any questions, I guess, before we go into approval? Or non-approval, whatever the board needs.
No, I'm good.
Seeing no questions, I'll make a motion to approve the dining service director job description.
Second.
We'll do a roll call vote. Tina?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Liz?
I'll abstain. I read it, though. Can I still vote?
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. Aye.
And I'm an aye. So that passes 4-0-0. Director of School Counseling?
1 second, let me just make note. Liz arrived.
Yeah.
On 2 wheels.
The counts are getting weird.
I know.
It's like 4-0-0, but that's because somebody else.
Yeah.
All right, so, so the next one is Director of School Counseling. The key change with this is that the term guidance counselor is out the window. Nobody is using that phrase any longer. That is no longer the terminology.
Okay, parents are still trying to keep up with that. I struggle with it. I have to correct myself every time.
And it'll probably take a generation, because we all had a guidance counselor.
Yeah.
But, so this is now updated to be the Director of School Counseling, not high school guidance. And Val, just like Lauren was involved in her job description, Val was consulted and had input into this revision that you have in front of you.
Any questions on the job description for Director of School Counseling?
Nope, so the mental health clinician reports to the director of school counseling?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'm wondering why the social worker's not on
I
that
was
list.
just, yeah. Does she report to the principal?
I think so, but I don't know why. Might not be on this either.
The social worker and the mental health clinician for LMS reports to.
Because they don't have a
Sorry.
director of
So
right?
the Director of School Counseling supervises school counselors, counseling office administrative assistant, which doesn't exist in your school, and the mental health clinician. But I think Val is also supervising the social worker. So
Do we want to table this one?
let's take 2 more weeks on this to make sure we have it right, because this is also written from a high school lens, and I want to make sure that that is correct.
That's the only director that we have.
Correct.
Right. Yep, apologies on that. We'll clarify that and bring it back.
Pause. Got it.
And then the last one is school counselor, and again, it's a similar update to the, so this would apply to all 3 schools, right? So we have a school counselor in all 3 schools, and you'll notice here it's reports to Director of School Counseling and/or School Administration. So that covers both GMS, LMS structure and CHS structure.
Any
Okay.
questions?
Do we have a motion?
Not yet.
I'll make a motion to approve the job description for the school counselor.
I'll second. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, we will do a roll call vote. Peter?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Liz?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye. So school counselor passes 5-0-0. All right, we're gonna go back to that. We've tabled director of school counseling so we can verify a couple of things. That'll come back in 2 weeks. We're gonna go back to the dress code. We started to talk about it, and then you were on your way, so we.
Did we receive any emails after I stopped correspondence at 3 o'clock?
No, not today.
No. Was anyone here to discuss it?
Nope. I made the point that I'm voting no on the policy. I do not support it. We have a committee for a reason, and why else would we have a committee? Andrew made a point that it's been pretty mixed feedback. We asked Principal Grantham about it when she gave her report, and she indicated it's also very mixed feedback. It's a mixed bag. There are some that are just don't care, some that are strongly no.
Who are these people
Who are what people?
that are saying all these things? Is it in writing or anything, or is it people word
I
of
think we only
mouth?
got the 2 emails from,
We only got the 2
Yeah, one
emails.
person.
Jen, I'm talking about Jen came up and spoke on it.
Oh. Have you heard anything in the schools?
Can you come back
Or
up
the
again?
te- Oh, no, it's fine. Have parents reached out to you?
I had no parents reach out to me regarding hats. I think that's what we're talking about here in this instance. But I can tell you what we did prior, when the dress code committee was meeting. Mrs. Thayer was the representative from the dress code committee, and she came back to all of our team meetings, and Mr. Sullivan is here, he can speak to this, where we went to each team meeting and had a conversation about what do you feel about hats, yes, no. These are the proposed changes that the committee is suggesting. We had some teams that were kind of like, I don't really care, either way, it doesn't really impact me, hats, no hats, doesn't bother me. We had other teams that were very firmly in the park of, absolutely not, it's disrespectful, we don't want them there. And we had other teams that were like, yes, give us our hats. So
It's cut right down the middle,
it,
yeah.
it was cut really right down the middle. And as far as the adults are concerned, as far as the kids are concerned, I would say it's probably more along the lines of, yeah, we'd love to wear hats. They'd love to do a lot of things. They'd love to have a lot of things and lots of freedoms, and not saying that we don't want that to happen, but we want to make sure we have a working and learning environment that everybody can pay attention and know what they need to do. And does that involve wearing hats? For some, maybe, and for some, definitely not.
In my personal experience as a middle school teacher, I find them to be a distraction. I find them to be a lot of disrespectful writing on them. I see kids hiding iPods underneath them and pitting one teacher against another. Well, Mrs. McDonald lets me wear a hat, Mrs. Grantham does it, and you know what ends up happening? They end up going to you to break the tie. Well, those are Mrs. McDonald's rules, those are Mrs. Grantham's rules.
Well, I think the other catchy part to it is, I believe in the policy, it talks about removing the hats in the hallway.
Not anymore.
No, we took
It
that
came
out.
out, okay. Because if that were still the case, but it should be the case, because as someone who uses the cameras on a regular basis for identification purposes, for issues that happen, it's very hard to identify a student with a hat on. If they tuck their head down and they start walking, I have to go around room to room and look at what they're wearing and what clothes they're wearing and who they are, versus when they have no hat on their head, it's
And
very
that's
easy
the
to
opposite
identify.
what we heard from the high school.
The high school said he had no problem identifying.
But you only see kids, I can tell certain kids from far, and I don't have 20/20 vision anymore. I can tell by a kid walks, the way they drag their leg, the way they swing their arms. But if they have a hat on under a camera, I wouldn't be able to tell who they were unless I had them. But you're supposed to know everybody and what they're wearing during the day and what kind of hat they're wearing, so get on the job,
I
Missy.
can figure it out, but it takes a little bit of energy and effort.
I know. It's just I'm not gonna pass judgment on anybody, it's my personal opinion. I saw a kid almost get scratched in the cornea when a hat was thrown at him in the hallway when they're fighting with their hats. It might have been under your watch.
I don't have a strong feeling personally either way. Again, as I said when I sat here originally, it's about teaching kids to advocate appropriately of what they wanted for changes. For example, the slippers was a big issue for our kids. We suggested, here are the people you write to, here's how that gets changed. It is changed. The hats wasn't something that originally came on our docket and came up in the meeting, so I have no strong opinion either way, personally.
I asked my vice principal what his thoughts were, and he said every school shooter was wearing something on their head. And I'm like, well, way to bring me down. I was just talking about disrespect coming into the building and stuff like that, and I don't want to bring it to that level. I want you to be able to pick out kids on the film like that, not running around and checking out outfits. But this is my personal opinion, and I'm just sitting here now.
You were entitled to your opinion.
Yeah.
So at this point, we've all talked about it the first time, we've talked about it the second time. I think we're ready to go ahead and vote. Is there, I'm not making the motion because I'll be voting no, but someone would need to vote to approve this, or make a motion to approve it.
I'll make a motion to approve the dress code policy as currently written.
With hats?
No
Oh,
hats.
it's what's written here.
The amended version.
The
that
amended
we
all right,
did last
sorry.
week, last time.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. It'll be, any other further questions, comments?
I think, from my perspective, I feel like I'm the swing vote on this one. And that's okay. I just, in my mind, I've taken a lot of input on this from, again, many different people, is for your benefit. And if it makes the kids' days a bit better or easier, I'm leaning towards reverting back to the way the policy was written. I think most people that I've talked to don't really care either way. There were certainly some strong yes, some certainly strong no, but the vast majority are like, it doesn't matter. And I'm of the opinion at this point, if it makes our kids' days a bit better or easier, then let's
How would it
consider
make their days easier? Oh, we're in the middle. How would it make their days easier?
I don't know. I mean, that's just the feedback I've received, right? So
Wearing an ear pod under their hat?
what's that?
Wearing an ear pod under their hat?
I think some kids feel more comfortable with hats on.
No, I could see that, and I know there are definitely allowances.
So is there again?
Yeah, there's a first and a second.
Element.
I'm off the.
We have a
That's
motion and a
CHS.
second, but we haven't started roll calling yet. So, the motion is to approve the policy as a second reading and the final version as written. That's the motion. So I will
That
take,
is the motion, and we're in discussion, correct?
No.
well, there's been a motion and a second. We haven't done the roll call vote yet. So right now, the question is, I think we're about ready to do it. I think the four of us sitting here know how we're voting, and so it's a question of if it passes as written or not, or if it doesn't, unless somebody wants to, well, there's a motion and a second, so.
Yeah.
No,
You can amend.
Yeah, exactly.
You can still amend, so someone can make a motion to amend to revert it back. I don't think Tina and I can because we were nays on it last time. But
Well,
you could,
But I could.
Andrew could.
Oh.
But that would change the spirit of the motion.
I think it goes back to a first reading again.
Right, so that's over.
Am I allowed to talk, or are we still in a motion?
You can talk.
We didn't hear any discussion either way, so nobody feels that passionate except for one person who cared enough to write a letter. That's where I'm at this point.
But we all had individual discussions with people about it. I think you said you talked to people about
I
it.
am in a middle school every single day, and I know hats are a distraction. I see you shaking your head, Mrs. Grantham.
What do we think? Come on up. You're the chair. I know, I'm violating my own rules.
Yeah.
Corey Solzen, 5th grade teacher. So I know in my own classroom, I use it as an incentive, so I teach decimals, and so they pay to wear a hat. So if we
I
have.
actually love that.
So if we have this in statement, I can't have that as a prize, and that's, I mean, Ms. Grantham can attest that that is a prize that I had, and because of talk about hats, no hats, they were disappointed that that's one of the things that I had to take off the prize wall. So that does tie hands for appropriate hat use. Does that mean we can't have hat days? I know those are very popular. And they're so popular because so many kids like to wear hats. And I know many that can wear them very appropriately. And if we allow them to, it's going to take away that, like, hey, I'm wearing my hat because I'm not supposed to. we're going to still have to fight that battle because they're going to wear hats whether we tell them to or not. If we say we're not caring about hats because we care about education more than that, then now we can focus more on education than what students are wearing. I'd rather make sure that students are wearing clothing that are covering them and appropriate as a male teacher. That is very uncomfortable, and that's the battle that I think we should be looking at, and not hats, because you're right, they, like, kids that have sensory issues, we don't want to call them out. I mean, religious purposes, there's that piece.
There
We
would
don't
be
want to call
always
that.
exception, a bad haircut, I get
Always.
it, yeah.
Cold days and having, like,
I think
winter
this is just
caps.
baseball hats, because if we're talking caps over your head, like, you can hide everything under your ears.
The way that was written
It's
was that you
baseball caps.
can't cover your ears. It didn't say baseball
Okay.
caps, but it said the ears, it was headwear, but that your ears could not be covered so that teachers could see if you were wearing the AirPods. That's
So-
the way it was written, and
So if it's about earbuds, I think we should look at earbuds, and if it's about
We
hats,
already
should
have an
look about-
earbuds policy, they
You're gonna be
shouldn't have
searching for
them.
everybody's ears for the earbuds.
What?
And we
You're
already
gonna
are.
have to look at every kid for their earbuds.
So that's
thank you
my.
for
Thank
your
you.
time, I appreciate it.
Thank you for your input.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the policy as written. So I'm gonna,
Wait. Not, okay.
there hasn't been
As
a motion,
written.
there has not been a motion
Okay.
to amend yet.
Same
So
motion.
it is the same policy that was amended at the last meeting, so
Okay.
if somebody wants to make a motion to amend, we can entertain that, but otherwise we move on to a roll call vote on approving this policy. Hearing no motions to amend, I'm going to do a roll call vote for those in favor of approving policy JICA and GBEBA, dress code policy, as currently written. Peter,
Aye.
Tina,
No.
Liz,
Aye.
Andrew,
No.
and I'm a no. So it fails.
Good luck.
2-3-0.
Correct.
And then the question I have is,
Does it go back? for
does it
another
go
reading?
back to the committee?
I'm not convening the committee again. They've already made their
It's the same
opinion.
thing.
You
They
have
just
the,
went
you have
back.
the committee's
Well,
opinion.
no,
They
it's
met-
only CHS right now. So this whole thing isn't
It's
passed now.
What?
None of this
So
is passed.
wouldn't it revert back to the last
The
version, the
original
prior
policy.
version of this?
None of the changes, including the torso
torso
change,
thing,
including
right.
the slippers, including all of the different pajama pants, none of those pass right now because the policy failed. So,
So the current policy is in play. We're right back to the current policy, and we haven't made, because there were a lot of other healthy improvements that were made for clarity. I mean, I will just tell you, the staff and the principals are spending an inordinate amount of time on dress code, and we were trying to get some clarity here and to fix this. But right now, we're status quo. Now, the good news is we have a week left and it's rainy.
And a little chilly.
Maybe that's not a big deal right now, but we have handbooks to print, and I'd like the handbooks to include
Dated language.
where the board lands on the actual policy that we're gonna put out there for next year.
In my view, I am absolutely okay with all of the other changes that were in the revised policy. I'd be fully supportive of having those be in the policy for the next time this comes up, which maybe is our next meeting.
Yeah.
I like the idea of having hats be an incentive driver.
I love
for
that.
students.
I do,
Yeah,
I
I think
love
that's
that.
that was a great suggestion, and that came out in some community feedback as well that I've received. And I'd like to see that as a part of the draft revisions.
They get to wear hats, they won. They get,
no, they don't, because it's just CHS. Right now, LMS does
Our
not.
current policy is CHS only.
And our
Did
current
I-
policy doesn't cover
it's
the
teacher
torso, and
discretion
our
at
current
CHS.
policy doesn't
my
allow
God,
the
I'm
UGG
so
slippers
confused.
or slides, whatever you choose to call them.
oh my God.
So I would like the opportunity, if it's okay with the board, to see if I can look at the hat language to tweak it a bit and to tweak the policy a bit to bring it back for a first reading at the next meeting.
I'm agreeable to that.
That's fine.
Spending
And if we vote on this at our, the July
June,
12th meeting,
yeah.
does that give time for print?
for handbook?
It does, because print is electronic, so we would have time to fix that. So,
Perfect.
yeah, we should have it in place by August, but that would give us time.
Yeah, I am not so concerned about the lack of decision for this evening, given it's, well, we're, what, a week out from the end of the school year? I mean, I don't think waiting another couple of weeks is that critical.
All right, like I said, I will take a look, I will have a conversation with Dr. Jetty, I will have a conversation
Well,
with whoever you direct me to.
So I would suggest this go back to the policy committee, which is you
Me
and
anyway.
Andrew. Right? And so
Yep.
let's send it right back there and come up
Okay.
with what language is being recommended to the full board from the subcommittee.
All right, Andrew,
That
tag,
meeting
where?
is on for June 21st, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
So as long as the board is comfortable getting it that night and not getting it the Friday before. That's the only wrinkle, but,
I'm okay with that.
but we know what most of it is. We're just gonna have final recommendation on the hat question.
Because that seemed to be the most
I was
contentious.
fine with everything else.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, moving on from dress code.
Can I just ask, I'd like us to revisit the director of school counseling question. So what I did is I went to the social worker
Job description.
job description that we just approved, and
Yep.
that said supervised by school administrator and the director of student services. So that answered the question for me, that it's not the director of counseling. And when there is a director of counseling who is a school administrator, they're covered. So I think we're fine on this. If we approve it as written, it'll.
Make a motion to approve the job description of the director of school counseling.
Second.
Any questions, comments? We'll do a roll call vote. Peter?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Liz?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so that passes 500.
Thank you for that, and I apologize for twisting that up, but I'd rather get it done.
For the moving into old business, for the follow-up to the community forum grading and reporting, are we still expecting a presentation next week?
Yep, Mary is on track. She will bring forward
I'm sorry, yeah, 2 weeks.
the grid that she has prepared for you, and she'll have all the final recommendations. She is still waiting, just so the board is aware. Some of the questions that have been asked of staff have not been answered, so she doesn't have all the answers as of today, but in order to get it in front of the board, we're gonna have to, make requests again to get some of the questions answered, so we'll do that.
Does anyone have any questions on that, or we'll wait until the presentation on June 21st?
Yeah, I'd like to be able to get it prior to the 21st to be able to
Agreed.
review it, because, I mean, this, her update is fairly thin, so there's not a lot of meat in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's livened some links up in it though, right? Or are they not?
Yeah, again, but there's not a lot of detail in it.
We will make sure that you have it the
At least the
preceding Friday.
before. Yeah. Moving on to the capital improvement plan. I think the question was, are we approving it again?
So really, the question is, hang on, let me check my notes, because I want to make sure that I get this right. What we were asked by the Capital Improvement Committee is to, the CIP is due to the committee by, I have July 17th, so we're in good shape for it, because really the question is whether the board is going to modify any of the work that we did last year. And you've been provided two documents. One is our detailed work on what we prioritize. The only update would be that the vote for the Robin Riley property went through, the budget worked out. I mean, we sort of knew where we were headed on that anyway. So that's just a kind of an update on where exactly we are on that number, or on that part of the plan. And then the town plan is also linked there, so that you can see where the school portion fell in the larger town plan. But my sense is that we're on course and staying the course. But I wanted the board to kind of weigh in, because Doug is our rep to that committee, and he needs some direction if we're going to make any changes, or if our report on the 17th is status quo. You have our stuff. And we're-
Andrew's our rep as well.
Sorry?
Andrew is our rep
Yeah.
as well.
Right, I'm sorry. Andrew's a voting rep and Doug is the non-voting rep, so yes, I stand
And they
corrected.
had a meeting, I believe it was this week.
They had a
Andrew
meeting
went.
on Monday night.
Yeah.
I
Mike
attended the
went.
meeting.
Oh, okay.
But this didn't really come up other than
Okay.
discussion about that they're on
Could you
track.
remind me where we are with the town CIP? I know there was talk last year about school having our own separate CIP versus town CIP. Where did that land?
We landed with including the school CIP on the town CIP. So that's why it's on the same document.
And I fixed, you'll notice that the first link, Peter had emailed me because he didn't have access. It was a document that was actually owned by Kim Kleiner, so I couldn't even give you access. So I made a copy of
I can
it.
see it now.
Yeah.
I made a copy of it and gave you
Oh,
access
okay.
to my copy, which is the same thing, so.
It
but-
does say copy of.
Sorry, I could see it because she had shared it with me. I just thought it was a public document, but it wasn't.
So will the numbers need to be updated for, because it says $325 a square foot, and I think Kyle just said that's not accurate.
Five.
Which one are you looking at? The Litchfield plan matrix?
Yeah,
And you're looking at which project? The
number 4, GMS new school, PK to 4, replacement of facility estimated at 90,000 square feet at.
Yeah, but 90,000 square feet is also not accurate. We were
Yeah,
looking
at
at
325 a square foot, and I think he mentioned tonight 500 a square foot, and I think we talked about 80,000.
Yeah.
So I don't know if our numbers need to be
I
updated.
don't know, was 80 the additions though? Or
No, 80 was the,
That was the
80
new
was the new
build?
school.
Okay.
So we may need to update our numbers, is my point.
So if it's okay for the board, let us go back to Kyle and just verify, because he was speaking,
Loosely,
you know, off the top of
generically,
his head
yeah.
tonight, so I just want to make sure.
He said
I know
80 a bunch of times, though. He did
Yeah.
say 80 a bunch of times.
we were trying to get it lower, but we hadn't achieved that, so let me just verify that with him.
In terms of priority, in terms of the projects, in terms of ranking and all of that stuff, I don't see any changes to the document. My question would be an update on the estimate for the school, given that inflation has been so dramatic
Yep.
in the past
We
year.
should also plan for the letter of intent of 7 million, which was reported this evening.
Right, weren't we talking about 10 million about that initially?
We were.
What was?
The letter of intent?
The letter of intent from the state on the school
7
building
million?
aid? Because we've been kicking the 10 million number around for a while.
The-
And he came back and said, Doug, came back and said it was, I'm
7.
sorry, Kyle,
7.
said it was 7 million.
Yep, the letter we have from the state is for 7.
But I think our conversations have been around 10 million for that.
Yeah.
So that's
I
a
think
change.
that was always the goal or the hope. That is not what the letter of intent came in at, I believe.
Yeah, and even this says applied for building aid, but remember, we didn't have that number yet. So let us do some refreshing of this, and maybe the way to, we have the question about where to proceed, and if this stays on as the board's capital plan, it's really recommending option 5, which is a new school PK4 on the new site. And versus if the board directs us in a different direction, we would have to update the capital plan at the same time. So really, all of this is tied to the next meeting, and we'll still be well ahead of the July 17th deadline to get it to CIP. So,
Sounds good.
Okay.
perfect. Thank you.
Also,
And
under,
in terms of LMS pavement and CHS energy, like where, that's still a priority that we're tracking here?
Well, if you remember, we have the 3 urgent projects listed up top, and then the others are priority, necessary, and desirable. So
So they're in the plan just to have in the plan.
that is correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Got it.
But if you look at the budget portion of it, Andrew, there's really nothing budgeted out until 25. So those are definitely further down. Our priorities continue to be the new school and capital repairs.
I'd like to see, I guess it's here, it's LMS, sorry, it's really small, LMS Fields. That is the relocation of the ball fields to the middle school, correct?
LMS Fields number 10 is to put the fields right it's basically beyond the parking lot on the upper plateau that is out there. So if we settle
Right.
on, so I think you're solving two things, right? So you settle on building the new school across from the fire station, and selling the existing school, then you have to relocate at least the baseball and softball fields that are down there up. And you have an opportunity, I think, to do a soccer field through the middle of it and not to be playing on the Litchfield, but to have an appropriate facility there. So yes, that would be the plan, to locate those there.
Thank you.
Any other questions on capital improvement? All right, and then additionally, under old business, we had moved the budget committee, website committee, and policy committee.
So I guess I'm up for all three.
So I think that's you.
All right. So just as an update for the policy committee, I know it's been reported to the board that the NHSBA policy database has been down. That has since been restored, probably a couple of weeks at this point. I have, for the superintendent and for Ms. Ains, I have spent quite a bit of time going through the NHSBA database and reconciling against the policy report that we first reviewed in March. I do want to take some time at our June 21st policy meeting to review that with you, and just then we can talk about it as a board with what the appropriate next steps are. That's the update there.
Sounds good.
In terms of the website committee, we have, and as reported in some of the comments from our last board agenda and this agenda, the website committee has certainly lost some momentum. I think as some of the staff have been focused on year-end activities and focused on other priorities at this point. There is a large data cleanup exercise that is necessary for the Griffin Memorial website page, the Litchfield Middle School website page, as well as Campbell. And we need the team to come together to make those updates, right? And do the data cleansing that's required. So there's that. I am not certain on what the board's intentions are or what you would like to do. At this point, the timeline is certainly very definitely at risk for being able to be complete by the end of the school year. And more importantly, with the summer vacation schedules now upon us with much of the staff, I don't know that I see it happening during the summer either.
Andrew, did you see Chris Jamrog's email from this afternoon?
I have not, no.
Yeah, so he did send an update, and what Chris reports to me is that he envisions livening up the new website in August, and that he has and he's launching out so here's the situation. What we want to launch is a clean, fresh update. If people don't do the cleanup, Chris is going to do the cleanup, and we're going to launch what Chris decides is the clean, fresh update. And then if stuff gets lost, people can recreate the lost stuff to put it in there in a clean, fresh update. So he's committed to having this available for the start of the next year. He's hoping that he will get people to do this. Or the other thing is some of the stuff that we don't have a chance to clean up will be brought over, and we'll clean it up in the new site. So it may be even more obvious in the new site that it's outdated or it doesn't hold. But either way, he's committed to a new site for August.
I mean, this is something we've been talking about for years. And I think it's critical that we have this up and running before the new school year. It's, I mean, I go back, whenever I log onto the website, it's
frustrating.
I find it really hard to navigate
It's awful.
that website.
It's
like-
awful.
And you find stuff and you can't find your way back the next time you go in.
Peter, you can search for stuff. There are a couple of documents that you can use the search feature, and it comes up that they're there, and we can't find where they are. We can access them through that, but if you try to say, but where's the source of it, we can't navigate to it. It's really bizarre. So it's time for fresh start. But, yeah, so that.
Yeah. And I think you're
Chris
right.
understands this. I've emphasized this with him. That's
Yeah.
why he's committed to an
Yeah.
August unveiling.
And there's so much on the website that doesn't necessarily have to be on the website.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, there,
I'd just like to see a school calendar on the front page.
Right.
This is what's happening at GMS. This is what's happening at
and I think, we still are running into things that are getting, scheduled at the same time as other things, and,
I don't know what you're talking about.
yeah.
Like tonight.
But, we've talked for years about having a district calendar that everybody uses, and every event in the district is put onto that one calendar, and it still isn't happening.
It will be.
Thank you. All right, and that'll end my gripe session for this evening.
No grapes.
No,
We're
maybe-
good.
It might be more griping.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Okay. That's website. Sounds like launch in August, and Andrew, you can, hopefully there'll be some more meetings of the website committee between now and then.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about my availability, it's the district staff that's been assigned to help support this, right?
Correct.
Given,
Yeah.
I don't know that it's really right to have this all be on our IT director either.
It's not
So-
right.
Agreed.
Are those committee members earning a stipend?
Well, so, yes, the people who are doing this do get a stipend. But either way you slice it, Chris has made that commitment. And we will have, it may not be perfect, but there will be a new look come August.
But it's not his job. The LMS person should be putting LMS things on a school district.
Correct.
Well, and that's how
Yeah.
we designed kind of the structure of the committee. But again, and it's honestly no fault of everybody, of anybody. It's just
No.
everyone's
Busy.
busy with other activities.
Okay. So moving on to budget committee, Andrew.
Budget committee, yes. The budget committee met, and there were some questions that were asked at the last meeting. Those questions I've added under the budget committee highlights. Those questions are all still standing as of this evening, and we do need a response.
I'm clicking on the committee report right now. So I think the
So,
conversation.
Question, I guess just for public awareness, right? Questions are confirmation that the projected FY23 underspend, so the underspend that was reported even just this evening, if that takes into consideration out of the 1.2 million, that takes into consideration summer payroll, right? Because Ms. Douglas did send out or did indicate a reminder that in years past that has been missed, and that has been a large unexpected that has impacted the fiscal year end number.
So easy answer is,
Yes, yeah, so I think we're still working on communication flow of things, but the easy answer to that is yes. A couple more paragraphs to that is that, we calculated in multiple ways before we came to the school board with the number. E-finance coordinates both the human resource as well as our finance together, so e-finance is encumbering the money, but then I also look back at the last couple of years and I saw the percentage increase for fiscal year 21 between May and June, and then again for fiscal year 22 between May and June. And I used different averages of that to predict what fiscal year 23 should be as well, and it matched up within the window of where e-finance is. So for a couple different reasons, we felt confident with that our numbers are where they need to be.
Okay. And then question 2 is regarding staff attrition, and question 3 is updated financials given the delays for solar.
So one of the conversations, and I think we still need to figure out how this is going to work in practice. We had this conversation with the chair and vice chair of the budget committee in terms of how the best and most efficient way for questions to be asked of district staff and how those flow in terms of essentially an individual budget committee member asking a question that goes through you that's then sent to Mr. Totten or Dr. Jetty to answer. The question is, Dr. Jetty and Mr. Totten don't answer to the board, the school board. And so are these questions that the school board is looking for answers to? Are these questions that we are seeking to have answered? And again, this has nothing to do with transparency. It's just more of a question of how the communication is directed. Because, obviously Doug and Dr. Jetty have very busy schedules. And so if they're devoting a significant amount of time to answering very detailed budget committee questions, is that how we want them spending their time as school board members? And so I
think in my view, I think it's in their purview to answer the questions that are within the realm of the budget committee asking.
I don't believe
Right.
it's in their purview.
These are direct financially related questions that I do think require a response.
Why do you think it's in their purview?
Because the budget committee has oversight of the financials, right? And if there's a question regarding the financials, it's part of our responsibility to provide a sufficient response.
I think it's in our best interest politically to answer their questions.
I agree with
That's
that.
what I absolutely agree
And I
with
would
that.
say and I would say this, if the budget committee has a question they would like an answer to, I'm happy to deliver the question and have it come from me. I mean, we need to.
I didn't hear all
we need to
that, but
not be
okay.
this turf war. Well, I don't report to them.
No, and I don't think
they're not
that-
the boss of me.
Right, I agree with you.
Answer the questions.
I agree that we do need to do that. The questions about the breakdown of staff attrition, that requires hours of analysis and work. And I don't know how that is of the budget committee's purview when their oversight is of the budget, not of individual
But
expenditures.
that's part of that, how you get to the bottom line is, right, how many people have we lost? I mean, it's a huge number. I mean, we all know it's a
And
huge
it's
number.
something that will be answered when we propose the next budget. And in
Right.
fact, I think that question will be answered in the next budget because we will see how many positions have been lost to attrition. We will see what's being projected. Again, I'm not necessarily against, and I want to be clear because I think transparency and open
paramount.
communication is
Yeah.
important. And I understand, and I'm going to be perfectly honest, we're digging out of a hole when it comes to public trust. So I absolutely am going to throw that out there and say that. However, I also am very concerned that we are asking a lot of, particularly Doug, when we are asking him detailed questions that take hours of analysis that will be answered at the appropriate time when the budget is submitted, but they're looking for the answer in June instead of before the budget's even been drafted for the next year. And so, again, I'm not saying no, but I'm saying how much time do we want Doug taking away from his day-to-day responsibilities to the district to answer individual budget committee member questions versus if the entire budget committee voted on the question and said we would like an answer to this because we think it's important and it's a 6-3 vote and everybody says we need an answer to this. I agree that to me that creates a higher priority for answering that question sooner than an individual member looking for details of information. So I see both sides. I understand we are digging out of a hole and I say that, but I also want to understand, and the conversation that we had with Mr. Sun and Ms. Stevens when we met with them was that questions would come through the budget committee chair.
Well, it's board to board. I think the piece that I'm just questioning is a direct email to staff about it when, really, we answer to the board. Like, if this is a question, like, if the question was posed as, the budget committee is wondering if the board has information on staff attrition, and
Right.
then you ask us that question.
Or when
And
would
if
it
you want
be
to direct us,
available?
we'll go do it. But you're forgetting that it's partly Doug, but it's also Holly. There are a few people who are going to have to pull some numbers and get this together, and we can do that, but we do that for the board.
I would think we have that information anyway. We would track that throughout the course of the year rather than have to go back to, from August 28th, 2022 to today.
I think, Peter, the difference is the budget committee met last Thursday, and then a direct email went to staff saying, answer these, can you answer these questions? And what I'm saying is, we answer those, and they get sent back, and we get 3 more questions. And so we end up in this back and forth, and it's like, really, just like individual board members don't have authority outside of a board meeting, nor do individual budget committee members, and it should be board-to-board conversation about what is it you want to know and how is that helpful, and we do want to be transparent, don't get me wrong. I just don't want to get into a back and forth email exchange that is taking us away from other tasks. It's the end of the year, you know. Doug admitted a mistake tonight because we're crazy busy. Okay, we're crazy busy.
When is the end of the
And
year? June 30th.
June 30th.
Stuff happens like lightning and.
And well,
Yeah.
exactly. And so the point is, we have to protect the fact that we're human beings who have a ton on our plate already, and back and forths are not helpful versus, you know, the board-to-board communication and direction to us. That will help us to manage our workflow.
So in my view, right, a couple of things here. One, this is where the experience is different between town questions to the budget committee and school questions to the budget committee, or to and from. And this is also like an acceptable response could be, hey, we acknowledge receipt of your questions, allow us a few weeks to pull it together. Nobody's asking you to get the answers immediately. But what we're asking for is that, yeah, we have a plan and we're working on it. There's no timeline here that says you have to answer this question within the next few days or a week or even the next 3 weeks.
But
Andrew, you posted it in the document, and then you wanted to move it to discussion tonight so that you could get answers to your questions.
Wasn't that what the emails were about this week?
Well, the email exchange was, we need to talk about it as a board, so that's what we're doing. Quite frankly, these are questions that are outstanding that I don't know that we have a plan to respond to. That's why we're having this conversation.
That you don't, I'm sorry, I missed the last part. They're outstanding and we don't have a plan to respond to? Is that what you said?
I don't know that we have a plan to respond to at this moment.
Sorry, it was in and out, so I was trying to make sure I heard it.
Sorry.
So I did respond that we began work on these. As soon as they came up, we began to start to pull this together. Doug knew the answer to number one because it's pretty straightforward. Number two is something that we are, to Peter's point, we do monitor. And we've reported to the board about staff attrition. And so if the board wants to share that information, we can refresh it, get it updated, and get that, and have the board liaison bring that back to the budget committee. Question number 3.
You've reported to the board.
Question number 3 is about solar, and I would anticipate your response being, this is really difficult to calculate.
Well, so that's exactly what it is, and we have not even we've had preliminary discussions about what we need to do to try to get an answer for that.
So why is that a complex answer to send to the budget committee? Why can't we just say, this is pretty complex to compile?
Do you think that would be a satisfactory answer to the budget committee?
But that's the truth.
I understand that, but I agree, but I also think the response back is gonna be, okay, then start to put that information together for us.
And if I may, I think that answer is owed to the board. Like, if the board wants us to try to pull that together and to dig into solar, and that is gonna be a complex piece, right? We've started to do some historical, I mean, the whole solar project with the number of delays that we've encountered, like, we're trying to piece this all together now to figure out exactly where we are. But I think the board deserves that update. That's where the answer should go. You should be informed on exactly where we stand on solar.
Right.
And what the impact has been. So again, if the question was, does the board have a handle on the impact of the delayed solar project? The board's asking that question of us, right? It's not the same as emailing us directly to say, the budget committee would like this answer. It's the board asking for it. That's the subtle difference in it.
Right, it's a subtle difference, and if we get that information, we should just be ready to share it with the budget committee.
And I agree.
Yep.
I don't know. I think there are situations where, I mean, Andrew, as the representative of the school board, when you have information that could help answer these questions, like, that's gonna take a lot of time, I think that you can communicate that
I
within
think
a
he still
meeting.
has to bring the question forward to the, to
Absolutely.
the overall board.
Right.
So he very well could have said, this is,
And this has been asked prior, in fairness, right? I have no idea if we started to do this analysis or not, right? We know that there's delays in solar, and we know that what was presented to the voters to get this approved is not panning out to be accurate, right? So I have no idea if this is readily available or not.
so I think the answer is it's not readily available. It'll take some time to dig into, to get the information. And that will be presented to this board, and then we can share it out. Because we probably should get that, we should probably see that information before it goes to the budget committee anyway.
Agreed.
When it's available.
And I hope everybody understands in this discussion, when the question comes in, my gut reaction, I think Doug's gut reaction was, good question. Good question. But we need to get it pulled together, and again, I feel our obligation is to bring it to you, and then it goes to the budget committee once it's been answered for the board. So we'll continue to try to nail that down, but that is gonna take some time.
So would it be fair to say that we hope to have a more specific answer for you in the fall? I mean, take the summer.
Yeah, we're compiling that, if we have it sooner, we can give it sooner, but.
Do you feel like your questions, do you have answers, Andrew? Do you feel like we need to talk about this more?
No, I mean, so what I've heard for number one is yes. What I've heard for number two is, well, I'm not clear on that one, quite frankly. It sounds like we can pull it together, or we have it, but it needs to be updated. And number three is it's going to take time.
Correct.
Yeah, two, I think we have shared that with the board. I actually, hang on a second. The last staff attrition memo that we shared with the board is dated May 23rd. So you had a number as of May 23rd. It's changed.
We had a number
It's
for
changed.
since March, right? March through May, correct?
Well,
That was the number that I know we had talked about.
oh, let me stand corrected. This is actually, I can't read at this hour apparently. I think this is a year old. We don't have an updated for. So let me verify. Maybe we didn't give you an earlier update. I thought we had, but we'll get one. Not a problem.
Any other questions on budget committee? All right, seeing none, that brings us to school board comments. There's so much going on.
I can't even remember all the things that I've been to.
It's a lot of
It's a
things.
blur.
But, okay, I have props. I went to the 6th grade entrepreneur fair today, and
Nice.
I am the proud new owner of lots of stuff that these kids worked on and came up with that are all beautiful and lovely.
Is that fake?
Oh,
That one.
yeah, it's felt.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that
I
cute?
wouldn't kill this.
Uh-huh.
It looked
Look at
real.
that.
I thought it was real.
Nope.
It's a
And then a crocheted keychain and a face scrub. So anyway, I just want to say good work to the 6th grade. I also got to see and hug Mrs. Sid. She was back to help for the event, which was fantastic to see. And I know the 6th grade teachers, Miss McCullum was in charge of it, but they all worked really hard to put this together. So good job to 6th grade for that. Again, we've been to so many different events this past week. I did want to give a big congratulations. I think many saw it on Facebook, but Liz and I attended on Saturday the award ceremony for Mr. Perez, who received the Assistant Vice Principal of the Year award. It was a lovely speech. We laughed, we cried. It was wonderful. And again, it was a great event. I'd never been to the Eddies before. So
there were a lot of. We got a selfie with Sean McDonald from
get a
NUR.
selfie, yeah.
Yep, we did.
Yeah. So it was just really nice to be able to be there to feel the camaraderie with the district, to feel the camaraderie with the high school, but particularly for Mr. Perez and make sure he was supported. we definitely tried to scream the loudest, out of all the tables when his name was called.
It was nice seeing all the exemplars in their fields.
Yeah.
It was really, yeah, it was nice.
And I definitely could see Litchfield being up there as either elementary school or middle school of the year. They had high school, secondary school, so we'll keep working on that.
Oh, and that Alvern won Teacher of the Year, the
Yeah.
ROTC teacher at
yeah.
Alvern. Yeah, it was, he spoke at our academic awards.
Yeah, he was
That-
fantastic. He was sitting at my table. Great person.
Yeah, he won.
I know there's lots of sports events going. I don't even
Lacrosse
think I
won.
could cover everything that's happened
Lacrosse
today.
won. That's
Do
all
we
we
know
need.
did LMS
great.
softball
The girls
win?
softball win?
They lost last week.
Did LMS softball? Nope, no idea. We'll have to figure that one out.
So what was the game at,
LMS.
that was LMS, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was
Softball.
LMS, yeah, the girls, and it's baseball and lacrosse that are still left at the high school.
Yeah. So I know I forgot a group or an organization that's doing something amazing, but I just, at the end of the year, I posted this on my personal page. I really do feel like we're all running on fumes at this point, but I particularly feel like our teachers and our staff and our admin, everyone is running on fumes at this point. So to the extent that we can, try to assume good intentions and that if
Give
mistakes
grace.
are made, give grace, give forgiveness, assume it wasn't intentional, and let's try and finish the year out on a really positive note. I think that would be awesome. So those are my school board comments. I'm happy to pass it along if anybody else wants to make a comment.
I attended the athletic awards at Murphy's Tap Room Carriage House where I'd never been, which was really over 300 people jammed into that room on tables of 10 to,
It's a nice room.
from Litchfield, yeah, it was like the, what do they call, the SBs? There weren't like a ton of awards, it was just, they're buying new banners for the gymnasium, which is really nice to see, because I know they haven't been using them because they're all so old, so they presented that. Athletic scholars, top 10 athletes, it was a lot of different people were recognized, it was nice, it was nice going out with town people. And tonight, I was at the senior awards night, which it always blows my mind how many kids are New Hampshire scholars, how many kids are in the National Honor Societies, all around music, arts, computers, respect, responsibility, all the different awards that they got. My son got the Respect Award for the high school, which I was very proud of. Yep, and he gets a little medal. And I'm glad, and then they had a slideshow afterwards, which was really, really nice. It's so nice to see so many different kids. Our Emma cleaned up. Emma got amazing awards. I wish I wrote it down. She got amazing awards, like the unsung hero, someone who works behind the scene, doesn't make a stink. Yeah, so Emma did really, really well. I was very happy to be part of it, and a little sad, but it is what it is. We'll work out graduation. We'll see what happens. And lacrosse won 8-0.
So that put them in the semis?
What?
That put them in the semifinal?
That was the semifinal. So their game is Saturday night, Sunday night? Sunday night is their game. I don't know where. And that's all I have to say. I'm sure, I had a joint loss meeting. I didn't report on that. But Doug, did you report on that?
Not much to report on that, was
I
there?
recruited a teacher.
Awesome.
I recruited a teacher to be on,
Recruit.
yeah, because it's not a bad committee to be on.
It's great for them to be on.
Yeah. It was-
We get to hear their
There
voice
were
more.
only
and-
4 of us there.
Yep.
And half of the time it was me not talking, which they were all really happy because I couldn't figure out my microphone. But, our goal is to recruit more teachers.
Sounds like a good plan.
Teachers and assistants. Yep.
Yeah, everyone. Because we meet 4 times?
Yep.
5 times? Yeah. And that's it.
Tina, Peter,
I'll
Andrew,
report out
any
now.
comments?
Just a general congratulations to everybody for all the things, and to everybody's parents and the community as a whole. Continue to make us proud.
What is it, a week and a half to go?
Yeah.
Graduation
Yep.
Friday.
Friday, and then there's a half day on Thursday next week. and that's
They
last
are,
day for
the
everyone.
fire chief is coming in tomorrow to discuss how many people can fit in the gymnasium, because it most likely is gonna rain on Friday and Saturday. So we have to discuss how many tickets people get and things like that. So they're gonna work on fire code things. I just happened to see them, they gave out a lot of awards tonight from different organizations in town. And I asked Paul Kelly.
The fire department is already listed, if you
It's
look.
like 1,400 people or something crazy.
16.
1,600 people?
So there's, oh no, 14, I'll tell you the exact number, but.
There's no way 1,400 people can fit in that room.
Well, it's because it's set up with chairs on the floor and bleachers. So they've already done the math, square footage, and the number of exits and so forth. So I know they're gonna clarify exactly how to do it, but it's, the number that's on the door for assembly seating is 1,474. So they will work with, and we're not gonna have that kind of crowd.
I
so
think they
they'll
were,
work.
everyone was, they were talking about 6 tickets each. I'm trying to remember the last time we had an indoor one. I think I gave my ticket to a parent. But I think that if there are 100 graduates and we each get 6 tickets, and then maybe 100 for the band and faculty, and
You're under 1,000.
so I'm 700, which is
You're
a
well
little
under
more
1,000.
comfortable.
So,
As long as the doors are open and the
well,
fresh air.
that doesn't include humidity and temperature, right? That's a separate question, but that's the number in terms of,
Oh, we can't have a wet floor with high heels. The heels I saw going today, can't do it on a basketball floor.
the floor
Yeah.
may be wet because it will be humid, possibly.
Put a runner out.
Well, we'll figure it out.
It'll be fine. It'll be beautiful and wonderful.
People be crying all over the place.
The floor will be wet from Liz crying.
Right.
No,
Yes.
no, I didn't cry. I cried at the athletic awards, that's it.
Any other school board comments for tonight? How are we doing with the manifest? Any questions?
Nope. I think they all have 3.
And we already did community input. I think we covered everything on the agenda. So we, looking ahead at the non-public agenda, we do have a resignation, we have nominations, and we have staff issues to discuss. So I'm going to read all 3 items in the non-public session. We would be going into non-public session to discuss A, the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, or the disciplining of such employee, or the investigation of any charges against him unless the employee affected 1, has a right to a meeting, and 2, request that the meeting be open, in which case the request shall be granted. B, the hiring of any person as a public employee. C, matters which if discussed in public would likely adversely affect the reputation of any person other than a member of the body or agency itself, unless such person requests an open meeting. Is there a motion to go into non-public?
So made.
Is there a second?
Second?
All right, roll call vote. Peter?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Liz?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. So we are heading into non-public. Thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. Our next school board meeting is Wednesday, June 21st, and it will be a 5:30 start. So have a great night.